Hello everyone, this is your friend Naruto Nexus 2.0 and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is what if Naruto was betrayed by his family and abandoned Konoha Part 1. Konoha is a very pretty place, especially at night. The entire city is surrounded by tall oak trees created by the founder, Hashirama Senju, or the Shodai Hokage with the Mokuden, giving the village the name Konohagakure. This village had produced great and powerful shinobi, from the powerful Sannin, to the Sandaime Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi. However, the most famous of all of the heroes of Konoha is none other than the Konoha no Kiro Senko, or the Yondaime Hokage, a man who had single-handedly destroyed armies of invading shinobi in seconds during the Third Shinobi World War. But his greatest accomplishment was one that cost him his own life. The defeat of the Kyuubi no Yoko on October 10th. While many know it as fact that the Kyuubi was defeated by the Yondaime, few know that to defeat the demon fox, he had to use the Shiki Fuin, a seal which by using the powers of the Shinigami himself to seal away another for eternity. On that fateful night, the Yondaime not only sealed half of the beast inside himself, but also the other half into the newborn baby, Naruto. The Yondaime knew that the Shinigami could only seal half of the demonic being, so with his last breath, he sealed the rest of the beast's yang chakra into the boy. His wish was for the boy to be seen as a hero, and as his legacy, to stand for all the people that gave their lives on that fateful day. This brings us to the present, 6 years after the Kyuubi attack, where a young boy with spiky blonde hair, bright blue eyes, and 3 whisker marks on each cheek, was running for his life from an angry mob of villagers. Needless to say, the fourth's wish had gone unheeded as many of the villagers and ninja pleaded for the boy's execution, believing that he was the Kyuubi in human form. The only thing that had kept them at bay was the reinstated Sandaime Hokage, who soon after the boy's status was released issued a law stating that those who were old enough to remember the Kyuubi attack were never to speak of it on penalty of death. While this stopped the populace from outright demanding the child's death, they soon found ways of going around the rule, by blacklisting him from shops and restaurants, forbidding their children from socializing with him, and the weekly beating, that with the help of the civilian court, went mostly unpunished. In Naruto's opinion, October 10th, his birthday, was the worst of all the days in the year combined. The day of the festival was the day the Anbu were too preoccupied to watch over him, and for some reason the villagers' hate was higher than normal. These were the days he was normally sent to the hospital for more than a week. Why? Thought the abused child as he ran down an alley with the mob close behind him. There he is, screamed a woman with pink hair, time to finish what our beloved Hokage started. She raised her fist causing the crowd to yell in approval. No, I can't get caught again, thought the blonde as he took another left, quickly realizing that it was a dead end. Shit. The crowd circled around him with knives, rocks, anything that could do damage and began their assault. Naruto, long ago, had come up with ways to cope with the pain of being hated for something he did not even know by smiling, playing pranks, and basically putting on the mask of the Baka. But tonight, the pain felt especially worse, and as he looked up to the faces of his attackers, he was able to push out the words, "Why do you hate me? Because you're a demon, that's why," yelled one of the villagers with unmasked hatred. "You are the reason my daughter's dead. But now I am finally going to get revenge." The man then took out a large kitchen knife and stabbed it through Naruto's chest as the crowd cheered in approval. As Naruto felt the warm liquid fall down his body, he collapsed and was about to ask again when he felt a heat coming at his back. He looked but was too late as a medium-sized fireball engulfed him in red embers. Naruto's screams of pain only seemed to excite the villagers as they cheered on the Chunin, who had fired off a Gokakyo no Jutsu at the defenseless child. Naruto could feel that he was in a lot more pain than normal. From what he could tell, he had a broken arm, a punctured lung, and a couple of broken ribs, not to mention the first and second degree burns he had all over his body. With bloody tears in his eyes, he slowly drifted to unconsciousness. As a villager tried to deliver a finishing blow, the pink-haired leader stopped him. "No, we can't kill him. even though he deserves to die, we can't be assumed as the killers. It has to die on its own. She looked down at the bloody heap of the demon, before pointing it to Chunin. You two take the child away from the village and leave him. Then remove any trace you have on you of this deed in return. The two ninja nodded before grabbing the child and leaving in a puff of smoke. The woman then turned to the rest of the mob. The rest of you return to your homes and rejoice. Tonight we celebrate the true death of the Kyuubi. Bored, 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 bored. These were the thoughts of a young man walking through the land of Hai no Kuni. The man was around 6'1", in his late 20s. He had toned skin with wild uncombed brown hair. His face was jagged with stubble and his eyes were a dull hazel. His attire was composed of a pair of standard shinobi pants with a matching Jonin vest, tan boots, fingerless gloves with metal guards, and to top it all off, a red and white coat with the kanji for fox on the back. This man was Raki Samayu, member of the Kumo no Sansoku. Why did I have to walk through Hai no Honey to get to you? I could have easily just taken a ferry from Taki. I could have stayed another night and found some entertainment, complained Raki as he trudged through the unending sea of trees. He looked up at the night sky. Well, at least it is a nice night, he thought with a smile. He had always loved nature, even before he became a ninja. He took in the smells of the forest. He loved the smell of the bark, the dew, the flowers, He paused. Dried blood. Instantly he was on the alert. Highly trained calculative eyes darted from left to right as he surveyed his surroundings while he pinpointed the smell's location. As soon as he had located the source of the smell, he moved silently over to the clearing, but what he saw caused his eyes to widen in horror and shock. Before him was a boy no older than 5 or 6, crucified to 2 pieces of wood with dried blood, and burns covering his skin. The boy's hair was a dirty blonde which had bits and pieces burned off, while his clothes were nothing but shreds of burned cloth. But the most defined feature was the 3 whisker marks on his cheeks. Cammy, what the hell happened here? As he rushed towards the unconscious boy. Without wasting a moment's hesitation, he removed the boy from the cross and began to work. You could never really be a good ninja if you did not know how to heal yourself. As Raki examined the boy, he felt that something was wrong. From the damage it looks like this boy took, it should be a lot worse, he shouldn't even be alive. Raki scowled at the thought of what had happened to this child and decided that it would be beneficial to take the kid away from the area. After all, waking up in a place surrounded by your own blood is not a pleasant experience. To throw off any trackers, Raki placed some false tracks, looking as if wild animals found him and used him as a welcomed snack. If this is any indication, doesn't look like the boy is very wanted where he is from. It would be better if the thought he was dead, thought Raki as he finished the false tracks. He then picked up the boy, and jumped into the trees. Raki was confused for the umpteenth time that night as he looked at the bandaged sleeping child by the fire. When Raki had arrived at his present location, from his examination the boy had second-degree burns all over his skin, a couple of broken ribs and a shattered foot. Now 2 hours after, the burns had all but subsided, his ribs were completely repaired and his foot was slowly healing itself. Even the boy's hair had grown back to replace the burned spots, and all Raki had done was clean and bandage the wounds. This all screamed one word through the young man's mind: Jinchuriki. That would explain the beating and why it had happened, but the question was which one. From intel he knew that Taki had one, but they were too far away. The 2 in Kiri were much older, and the Ikibi Jinchuriki would not let others even touch his container. Raki looked at the boy once again, hoping that he could get even the slightest piece of information. But sadly, he was at a loss. He looked up at the night sky for a moment before unsealing some fish he had caught earlier that day. Well, sighed Raki as he prepared the fish, he probably won't want to talk on an empty stomach. The first thing that awoke Naruto was the smell of something delicious. He creaked open his eyes and was surprised to find he was not in the normal hospital room he would normally wake up to after a beating. While surveying the area, His eyes soon passed over a young man wearing a red and white coat leaning over a small campfire. This only served to scare Naruto even more. Where was Gigi? What had happened? Was he in the village anymore? What was that heavenly smell? It was at that moment the man looked straight into Naruto's eyes. They did not have the hatred that most eyes of the villagers had. They had a warm glow that seemed to show kindness and warmth, more like Gigi's or the Ichiraku's. That said man then picked up a cooked fish and tried to give it to Naruto. You know it would be easier to heal if you had something in your stomach, he said with a smile. Naruto did nothing but stare at the fish, causing the man to pout. Come on, it won't kill you. Look. He then proceeded to take a bite out of said fish. Gathering his courage, Naruto slowly reached out and grabbed the fish. He took a deep breath, and then took a huge bite. Well, if it is poisoned, I might as well not die hungry too. His eyes widened after the first bite and he screamed, "This is great!" and proceeded to devour the fish. Raki chuckled at the boy's hunger, watching as he ate like he hadn't in weeks. Probably hasn't, spoke a voice in his head which caused him to frown. When the boy had finished eating 3 fish, he finally looked at the man and said, "Anyo, but who are you?" Raki smirked and said, "Samayu Raki," with a hint of pride, "and who might you be?" The boy gave him a fox-like grin and said, "Uzumaki Naruto of Konoha, and future ninja." The boy's last name caused Raki's eyes to widen. Uzumaki. Could this kid be related to the Akai Chishio no Habanero? He had had the unpleasant privilege of meeting the woman in battle. She was with no doubt a powerful shinobi, and had sent him home with a broken arm. Something not very common when you are considered to be one of the top ninja in the village. He took the time to examine the boy again. While the boy's supposed mother had been a red-haired, fair-skinned woman, this boy looked nothing like her in the sorts. The boy had tan skin, blonde hair, and bright blue eyes. This caused Raki's eyebrow to rise. There were not that many people with blue eyes in this world. The only blonde-haired, blue-eyed person that he knew of that had come out of Konoha was the Yondaime Hokage. How could he have not seen it before? This boy was basically a chibi version of him. If the Habanero and the Konoha no Kiro Senko had had a child, he would be the most powerful ninja in the world. Also with his Jinchuriki status, no man in his right mind would want to mess with him. But this raised another question: if he was the son of the so-called hero of Konoha, then why was he hated? Obviously the Yondaime had kept his child's birth a secret. If Iwa had known, they would have sent an entire army to kill the kid. This means that the hatred of the kid had to be because of his Jinchuriki status, with the only Biju for Konoha to ever hold, the Kuibi no Yoko. Raki-san, 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 screamed Naruto as he had watched the man stare into space for close to a minute, which for him was almost an eternity. Shaken out of his stupor, Raki replied. He then gave a sheepish grin and said, "Sorry, must have been thinking too hard." Naruto gave him a mock glare, then looked around and asked, "Where am I and how did I get here?" Raki adopted a sad look while he poked the fire with a stick. "I found you out here, beaten to a pulp, then crucified to a stake." Naruto looked down to his feet with a shadow over his eye. "Oh," he shakily replied. Raki knew that he should not ask, but he had to know. Does this happen a lot?" It was silent for a few moments before he said in a quiet voice, "Yes, but I am getting used to it." This caused Raki to subconsciously grit his teeth and ball his fists. No child should get used to being hated and hurt. "Don't you have a guardian or something to watch over you?" said Raki, trying to keep the edge out of his voice. Naruto just shook his head. "No, I know that Hokage Gigi and the Ichirakus care for me, but there is little that they can do with Gigi in the office and Ichirakus in business. The Anbu Gigi has that watch me sometimes help, but they only come to stop the fatal attacks, then leave." Raki was boiling with rage. No one, especially a child, should have to deal with this. He was prepared to go to Konoha right now and massacre the entire populace. But the worst part is, Raki stopped his planning on killing everyone in Konoha to look at the boy, and when he saw his tears, all the rage dissipated. I don't even know why, said Naruto as tears began to fall down his face. They blame me for killing people I don't remember, doing things that I don't know. They blame me and call me a demon for things I wish I knew. If I did know, I would apologize, but when I asked Gigi, he would avoid the question, and when I ask the mob, they just call me a demon and hit me harder. Raki looked at the almost broken child in front of him. A child who had seen things that others' nightmares could not hold a candle to. He knew he had to help. He would not let this kid go back to that. He gained an impassive look on his face and spoke in a smooth, soft voice, "Do you want to know why?" Immediately Naruto's head was up with a look of shock on his face. Why you know, and you'll tell me," said Naruto, the tears beginning to fall again. Raki nodded his head, "Only if you want to know." Naruto pondered the question for a long minute before nodding for Raki to continue. "What do you know about the Kyuubi?" asked Raki. "Not much other than it was killed by the Yondaime," said Naruto as he tilted his head in confusion. Raki shook his head. "No one can kill a tailed beast, Naruto, since they are just large masses of chakra, and no one can kill chakra. The only way to defeat a Biju is to seal it." Naruto's eyes widened in realization as Raki continued. The Yondaime used a special sealing technique to seal away the Kyuubi into a living vessel, a vessel whose chakra pathways are still developing, in other words. Me, Naruto stuttered, but then looked down and said with a broken voice, "I guess I really am a demon," only to be slapped upside the head by Raki. "Never say that again," said Raki with a steel gaze. "I may not have known you for a long time, but from what I can see, you are not a giant, bloodthirsty, chakra beast. You are Uzumaki Naruto, a young boy who has been hated for absolutely no good reason." Naruto stared at Raki for what seemed like hours, before a small genuine smile, one which not even Gigi or the Ichirakus had seen, appeared on his face. "Thank you," he said, before tackling Raki into a hug. He was surprised at first when the kid had hugged him, but he soon shook it off and hugged him back. "Now," said Raki as he put Naruto back down and patted the dirt off his coat. "I am going to make you a once-in-a-lifetime offer, kid," Raki said with a grin. "How would you like to be a ninja?" Naruto's eyes widened to the size of dinner plates. All his life he had wanted to be a ninja, to gain the respect and love of the village. "But if I go and train with Raki-san, I won't be a ninja for Konoha," thought Naruto, which caused him to frown. But would he really want to be in charge of protecting the people who hurt him? Even if he would put everything on the line to save Gigi or the Ichirakus, would he do it to save the rest of the villagers? Naruto thought of what Gigi would tell him if he was also here. The words, "Do what will make you happy," came to mind, and he would surely be a lot happier training to be a ninja away from all of the hatred. Naruto closed his eyes before opening with a new determined look. "Hi, I will go with you, Raki-sensei." "Ma," said Raki, putting his hands up in defense. "I'm not all for that respect stuff, kid. Raki will just be fine." "Hi Raki," said Naruto as he gave his new teacher a fox grin. Raki smiled at this, the look to the stars. "Well kid, you better get some rest. Tomorrow we leave this forsaken land and start your path to becoming one shinobi of Kumo." Naruto nodded before moving back to the sleeping bag, falling asleep almost instantly. Raki smiled at the sleeping kid before moving his gaze towards Konoha. Today marks the day that Konohagakure fell as the strongest of the elemental nation. You will soon know the great treasure you have lost, when your shinobi cringe in fear when the name, Naruto, is spoken. Remember this day, Konoha, for this is the day that Namikaze Uzumaki Naruto began his rise towards greatness. It had been 2 days since the festival, and Hiruzen Starobi, Sandaime of Konoha, was in his office filling out a seemingly endless pile of paperwork. Why do I need to sign off about what kind of dog food the Inuzuka clan feeds their dogs with? But this was not the reason he was upset. He had not been able to go see Naruto for his birthday, he had even gotten him an orange jacket as a gift. He was not worried about the boy. Naruto had made him a promise that he would not leave his apartment all day for his birthday, because he knew that was when the villagers were at their worst. Sarutobi frowned at the mention of the villagers. They had never liked the boy and along with the civilian council had tried to make Naruto's life a living hell. Sarutobi still remembered the rage he felt when he found out that Naruto had been kicked out of the orphanage and had been living on the street for a year. The Shinobi Council was mixed on the subject of Naruto, while the Inuzuka, Akamichi, Nara, Aburame, and Yamanaka clan tried on many occasions to make Naruto's life a bit better. Even Tsume tried to adopt him. The elders, Homura Mitokado and Kaharu Udatane, along with help from the Hyuga, Uchiha, and the civilian council stopped them and tried to place Naruto under execution for false charges. Danzo seemed to have his own agenda, always throwing in the idea of Naruto being used as a weapon for Konoha, or in reality, a weapon for Danzo. Hiruzen scowled. The day that he gets Naruto is the day that Kakashi and Jiraiya give up porn. Deciding that his work was done for the day, Hiruzen walked out of his office to go visit his favorite blonde adopted grandson. As Sarutobi walked through the streets he got nods of respect, which he politely returned, smiling and waving at the children who walked by. As he neared Naruto's apartment, he spied the new graffiti, of, Die Demon, and other messages painted on the wall. Hiruzen sighed and continued to walk up the stairs of the apartment complex, mentally filling to place a D-rank mission to clean up the mess. As he opened the door to the Naruto's apartment, he found that it was unlocked, not surprising because Naruto never locked his door. He peered around the room and found that no one was here. He sighed. Naruto must be off doing one of his pranks. The room itself was quite small, the paint was peeling off, and the floor was covered with dirty clothes. His eyes stopped when he looked on the table, before slowly widening with horror. On the table was a knocked-over cup of cooked ramen. This was bad. Naruto and uneaten ramen were two things that would never be together unless something truly horrible had happened. Sarutobi's mind instantly went into gear as he searched for any type of trail. When he found one leading out of the apartment he was off. He followed the tracks down the twists and turns of the alleyways until a familiar stench reached his nose, the stench of blood. As Hiruzen turned the corner, he was greeted with the sight of an alleyway completely covered in dry blood. He quickly surveyed the site, finding lots of ash under a dumpster near the scene. Was a Kaden just used on Naruto? He then found some barely visible tracks of Naruto leaving the area. So some of my own shinobi were a part of this They must have been Chunin from how well they covered the tracks. But they did not suspect I myself would be following the trail. Sarutobi pulsed his chakra and 3 Anbu quickly appeared by his side. What do you need, Hokage-sama? Said one with a Neko mask. Neko, come with me to follow these tracks. Uma and Taka, go find a medic, I think we will be needing one. Said the Hokage before jumping off in the direction of the tracks with Neko close behind. Please be alright, Naruto-kun, prayed Hiruzen as he jumped through the trees. After about 2 hours of tracking, the Hokage and his guard reached a handmade cross with dry blood on it. Hiruzen paled. The blood looked to be a couple of days old while the ropes looked as if they had been ripped off by a wild animal. The animal tracks then proceeded to go deeper into the forest to devour its prey. Hokage-sama, Neko said, these tracks are a couple of days old, even if Naruto-san could have survived, and he would have been dead by now. I am truly sorry. Hiruzen looked down to the ground with a grievous look before saying, that is fine, Neko. When we return to the village, I want you to gather Yuhi Kurenai, Hitaki Kakashi, and Maeda Guy and tell them to come to my office. Neko nodded before the team of 2 started their long trip back to the village. Naruto, thought Hiruzen, I have not only failed you, but your father as well. This was odd, thought Kakashi as he pondered the Hokage's reasons for having him come to his office. It could not be a mission because he himself had ordered Kakashi to take a break. After Minato-sensei and his child had died, Kakashi had thrown himself completely into his own work, to stop the painful tug of loneliness from returning. Kakashi had been one of the few besides the Sandaime and Jiraiya to know of the child's birth. He had had so many dreams of watching over the child like his sensei had after Kakashi's own father had killed himself. He did however follow his late teacher's final words to treat the boy with respect, even if it was hard for him to watch over the boy due to his continuous Anbu missions, had even protected the child from drunks and mobs before he could get hurt. As he entered the Hokage's waiting room, he spotted Maeda Guy, his eternal rival, and Yuhi Kurenai, a seasoned chunin. Both along with Sarutobi Asuma, who was currently part of the Shogunin Junichi, had been part of Team Uzumaki under Kushina Uzumaki. Both her and Minato's teams had begun to train and do missions together when Minato and Kushina had started their secret relationship. Kurenai had often teased that Minato had a thing for Kushina, which everyone had quickly disregarded. That was until they caught them making out at the training grounds. After looking around, he nodded a hello, then pulled out his famous Ika Ika and, much to Kurenai's ire, began to giggle pervishly. However, his fun was short-lived when the secretary appeared, informing them that the Hokage would see them now. When they entered the office, they were shocked to find that the normal Nin no Kami, whose power was known throughout the 5 nations, was replaced with a sad and tired-looking old man. Guy was the first to regain his composure and responded in his usual tone, "Greetings Hokage-sama, what youthful task do you have for me and my youthful comrades?" The Hokage shut his eyes for a moment before opening them and responding, "Guy, there is no task you must be doing or will do. I have asked you here to talk to you 3 of a matter of great importance." Kakashi raised his only visible eyebrow at this before asking, "How great of importance?" "SS rank," spoke the aged Kage curtly. The 3 shinobi instantly stiffened up as Guy adopted his serious face and Kakashi put away his precious Ika Ika. The Hokage nodded before sending his Anbu out of the office, and activating a silencing seal. He then began to say, "Now I must start with saying that I have not been completely truthful to you these past years." The Kage as he stood up from his chair, turning to look out the window. 6 years ago when you asked if the child of Uzumaki Kushina and Minato Namikaze survived, I admit I lied to you about his death. The 2 Jonin and 1 Chunin's eyes widened. Sensei's son survived, thought Kakashi with a mix of happiness and regret. Happiness for having the chance to repay his teacher, while regret for not being able to help the child earlier. "Anyo Hokage-sama," said Kurenai, who was still in a state of shock upon the revelation, "but who is the child?" Hiruzen gave her a somber smile. "His name was Uzumaki Naruto, but you might know him better by what the villagers call him, the demon of Konoha." Kakashi's eyes widened even more before he narrowed them in anger. He had seen the child on a regular basis and could have been able to help him. The horrors he had seen Naruto suffer were the things that he had envisioned protecting him from, and he had done nothing. Kakashi looked around the room to see how his friends were handling the news. Guy, who normally wore a seemingly too bright smile on his face, was distorted into a mask of pure rage. His hands were fists just itching to pulverize the men responsible for what Naruto had gone through. Kurenai, who normally kept her emotions under control in the workplace, was on the curb of having a breakdown. She had been closer to Kushina than anyone, and had seen her as more of a mother figure. The thought of not being able to help the woman she admired most child was agonizing. Then it clicked in Kakashi's head. He spoke with barely controlled rage. The old Kage nodded sadly. "From what we can tell, Naruto was taken out of his home during the festival, beaten to a near-death state, which not only was the work of normal weapons, but also Kaden justice, was then removed from the village and crucified for 2 days, where he most likely died and was taken away by some animal to eat. That did it." In seconds Kurenai was on the ground sobbing, mumbling about how she had failed her teacher. Guy went to comfort her, but one could see the tears dripping down his face. Kakashi just stood still in a state of shock after finding out the way to repay his sensei for his kindness was gone. A lone tear drifted down his unmasked eye. I am sorry to tell you this, said the Hokage, regaining their attention, but it is obvious that some of our own shinobi were a part of this. Therefore we must make an example of this to anyone who tries to betray the leaf. You three will go discover who is responsible for this and make them pay dearly, in front of the entire village. Kakashi, Kurenai, and Guy all steeled their gaze, intent on bringing absolute hell to the men who had done this. Make it gruesome, said the Hokage in a dark voice, one must know the consequences of disobeying me, the Hokage, and their village. You are dismissed. The three were gone in an instant, trying to be the first to find the murderers so they could have first crack at them. It had been almost a week since he had left Konoha and Naruto felt great. As soon as they arrived in Yu, they had entered a department store, and after a long and tiring debate on whether or not orange was a proper color for a shinobi, had decided on a wardrobe. Naruto had chosen to go with a pair of black baggy pants, a dark orange muscle shirt with 2 shinobi-style boots. Raki could not completely make him give up his favorite color. When they went to counter, Naruto was a bit frightened. Who wouldn't be when for your entire life, anytime you had tried to buy some food or clothes, you would be chased out with a broom. Naruto looked up at his mentor, who sent back a small smile before pushing the kid towards the desk. Gathering his courage, Naruto, in his new clothes, walked up to the cashier and said, I would like to buy these clothes, cashier-san. The woman looked down at the small blonde in front of her before her eyes widened like dinner plates. In seconds she was around the table and glomping the poor child while screaming, kawaii. As soon as Naruto realized what was happening to him, felt the 2 mounds pressed up against his cheeks and began to blush. This only made the girl squeeze harder at how adorable it was. Raki, who had been watching with an agape jaw, soon realized he had hit the goldmine of woman attractors. He smiled deviously as he thought of all the plans he would have in store for his young apprentice. 20 minutes later, after the woman had finally released Naruto when he was about to go unconscious from lack of air, they were paying for their purchases with a large discount. Raki and his student then went to a pocky stand, and sat down on a bench, watching the families and traders' daily routine. Nay, Raki, Naruto asked, turning his whole body towards his sensei, what exactly are you going to be teaching me? Raki looked at the boys as he pondered his question, slowly chewing on his pocky. What do you think it is like to be a shinobi? He asked finally, returning his gaze to the crowd. Naruto was surprised but chose not to speak as his teacher continued. A shinobi's life is full of death, danger and murder. We cannot avoid it, only learn to live with it. Raki spread his arms as to show the crowds of people in the square. We kill on a daily basis. I myself have killed hundreds of men and women, and my sensei even more than that. Naruto paled as he thought of all the blood. We kill, we must accept that, said Raki, still looking into the crowd, but we must also find a reason to do what we do. Something to help get us through the night. For some it is money, others family, but trust me kid, you will not survive long in this line of work if you cannot come up with an answer. So I ask you, Raki turned to face Naruto, why do you want to be a shinobi? Naruto was at a loss. Before, he would have quickly said to gain everyone's love and respect, but that was not the answer he wanted. Living the life he had, you learned very quickly that it takes a lot of work to create true bonds. But when the bonds are built, they are not easily broken. This was the reason that Naruto had always treasured his relationship with Jiji, the Ichirakus, and now, Raki. Those people were more precious than any currency, and Naruto would put his life on the line. It was then Naruto had his answer. He took a deep breath, I want to protect my precious people. Raki just continued to stare at him, nonverbally telling him to continue. I know I don't have many right now, said Naruto as he looked up to the clear blue sky, but someday I will, and I want, no, I need to be strong enough to protect them at all costs. Raki smiled at his student's words. Nice kid, really nice. Well, you aren't gonna get that strong sitting on your, said Raki as he stood up. Time to start you on that path of yours, kid. Naruto gave Raki a grin, which he quickly mirrored as they set off to the canyon of the town. The outskirts of the village were very rocky and steep, but on the plateaus were wide, open green fields. Perfect for the training use of ninja, whose workout sessions would normally destroy the land around them. In the center of one of these plains was Raki, facing a giddy Naruto. This is it, thought Naruto, as he bit his tongue to keep from yelling in joy. This is the day I become a ninja. So what are we going to do? Maybe we start off with some high-powered justice. Maybe one that can turn a mountain to rubble, man, that would be Suigo. Maybe a Su-mph. Naruto was silenced when Raki cupped his hand over the boy's mouth. Geez, kid, why don't you just talk your enemies to death? That might work, said Raki as he rolled his eyes. Was I like this when a sensei taught us? He grimaced at the thought. Do you even know what chakra is? Raki asked as he removed his hand from Naruto's mouth. Chakra. Naruto tilted his head in confusion. No idea what you're talking about. Raki sighed. This is going to be a long day. No baka, chakra. In all essence, it is the source of a Justu's power. It is basically the combination of physical energy, which is in every living thing, and spiritual energy, which is the combination of a person's experience and training. In other words, no chakra, no jutsu. Raki looked at his student to see if he had gotten everything, which thankfully he had. Good thing this kid soaks up information like a sponge. Raki smirked. Before we can do anything, you have to learn to find your own chakra, said Raki as he formed the ram sign. This is the ram sign. It is a hand seal commonly utilized to mold chakra. All you have to do is find your chakra and release it. Remember, we can't move forward until you have mastered this. Naruto nodded before placing his hands in the ram seal, and began to search for any form of energy within his body. You will feel a warm sensation when you find it. Don't be disappointed if you don't find it on your first TR. Raki started but was soon cut off by a large blast of energy. His eyes widened, and then quickly focused on Naruto. A large blue orb of chakra had amassed itself around the boy, but anyone could see the ever so often flashes of red that penetrated the blue. The orb of chakra soon dissipated, however, and left a heavy breathing Naruto, smiling like a maniac. How was that? Naruto asked between breaths. Incredible, thought Raki as he continued to process what had just happened. Naruto has low Chunin level reserves, and he is only 6. If they continue to grow like that, image what kind of powerhouse he'll be when he becomes a genin. Raki chuckled at his student's enthusiasm. Nice going, kid, but this will probably be one of the easiest things for you. Jinchuriki generally have higher reserves than most people because the demon inside them is just one great big spirit, creating giant reserves for their containers. Meaning that most of the main exercises we are going to be doing will focus around control, rather than building up your reserves. Naruto frowned at this new information, but comforted himself with the thought of how quickly he had found his chakra. Now comes the fun part. Raki grinned as he cracked his knuckles. Naruto paled. He was not looking forward to the next part of his training. Every morning at sunrise you will wake up and do 25 push-ups, 25 sit-ups, 100 punches for each arm and 100 kicks for each leg. Finally, you will then run for 2 miles before coming to me for chakra control and other drills. Naruto gaped. Are you insane? There is no way I will be able to do all that. Well, Raki's grin grew more sadistic. He put his hand on the ground where a large seal area appeared before calling out, Kuchio's no jutsu. There was a puff of smoke, and out came a large orange fox, easily the size of a horse. I could always have this guy chase you while you did your warm-ups. As if on cue, the fox started to growl and brand his teeth. Needless to say, Naruto had already started. This continued for the next year. Every week or so Raki would up the regiment. His body, which was once malnourished and weak, was now strong and toned. He had grown a total of 3 inches after Raki had forced him to stop his all-ramen diet, standing well above the other 7-year-olds. After lots of persuasion on Naruto's part, Raki had also begun his taijutsu training in his personal style, the Kitsune no Sutairu, a fighting form of his own invention that utilized feints and speed to deliver fatal blows to the enemy. Though he only knew the basic katas, Raki said that his body was perfectly built for the style of fighting. Naruto had also begun to wear weights. After Raki had discovered that Naruto's body quickly adapted to strain, had begun to add more weight twice a week. Currently he was on a total of 16 kilos per arm, 20 kilos on each legs, and 30 around his torso. His speed now with his weights was that of a seasoned genin, but when removed could match mid-chunin ranked speeds. Though Naruto was not as skilled in control as his other focuses of training, they were good for someone his age. Raki had started him off on using his chakra to keep a blade of grass straight up on his finger. Though it was difficult, with lots of time and sweat, Naruto had managed to get one blade of grass to stand on the tip of his index finger. But, being the slave driver he was, Raki would not move on until it was second nature. After a month, when Naruto was able to keep 2 blades of grass straight up on all 10 fingers, Raki had shown him wall climbing, which after the control exercises he had been doing was a piece of cake. That was until Raki had him run up and down the wall for hours on end while he threw blunted kunai at him. Raki told Naruto that it served 3 purposes. The first was to heighten his control over his chakra, the second was to improve his evasion on the battlefield, and third was that it was really entertaining. When not training, Raki and Naruto were normally on the road, traveling from country to country, mostly staying out of Konoha, Iwa, and Suna territory. While on the road, the two worked on observation and education. Raki would have Naruto walk through a group of people, then ask him what he had learned. At first Naruto was confused as to the point of this training before Raki explained that spotting the smallest irregularity in someone's appearance or stature could quickly tip you off and help you avoid trouble. Raki seemed to value the blonde's education greatly as he constantly talked to him about geography, psychology, mathematics, human anatomy, politics, a session which Raki liked to call modified history Raki style, which only talked about great leaders and battle strategies, and Naruto's favorite subject, Fuin Just You. Sealing seemed to be an area of specialty for the blonde. He had seen Raki seal some supplies into a scroll. He had asked about it. Raki told him that sealing was a rare and complex art, few people knew how to do it properly and was a commonly sought-out trade in the ninja world. He went on to explain that unlike genjutsu or ninjutsu, Fuin Just You had almost no limitations. All it required was skill and creativity. At the next town Naruto had gone into the local library and read all the books he could about sealing. Discovering that it required very neat handwriting, he began to work on his own until everything he wrote was crisp and clean. He had later that day made his first sealing scroll, which surprised him, because in the books Naruto had checked out, it had said that the art of Fuin Just You took years to merely start, and he had done it in a week. When he asked Raki about it, he just chuckled then said something like father like son. Unfortunately before Naruto could clarify what that meant, Raki told him that they were going out for ramen to celebrate, which silenced all other thoughts in the blonde's mind. Today, after Naruto had finished his extended warm-up of 300 push-ups, 300 sit-ups, 500 punches with each arm and leg, and his 15-mile run, he walked up to Raki only to see a piece of blank paper in his hand. What are we doing today, Ero Masuda? Raki sighed. Over the past year Naruto had learned of Raki's high interests in the brothels, red light districts, and even the beautiful woman who happened to walk by in every town. Therefore, Naruto saw it deserving to call him Ero Masuda, because he was pervy, and Raki had had Naruto walk down the streets or in front the bathhouses to attract all of the women who just loved to touch his adorable whiskers. Quiet kid, today we start your ninjutsu training. Now this doesn't mean that we are done with your other studies, only that we will be focusing a majority of our time on ninjutsu because of your gigantic reserves. Naruto nodded with a blank expression on his face. During their trip, one of the things that Raki had drilled into Naruto's head was the difference between work and leisure. While on his days off or breaks, Naruto was his normal happy-go-lucky, ramen-loving self. As soon as the training began, he was a mask of concentration and tranquility. Raki held up the piece of paper. "This is chakra paper," he said as he waved it around. "By channeling your chakra into it, you can see what type of chakra nature you have. If it burns, you have Kaden; if it gets cut, you have Futon; if it crinkles, it is Raiden; Doden, it turns to dust; and Sweeten, it dampens." Raki handed the paper to Naruto, who quickly started to channel chakra into it. The results caused both student and teacher's eyes to widen in shock. The paper had split in half, and while one side quickly went up in flames, the other was crinkled to a ball that dropped on the floor. Was that supposed to happen?" Naruto asked as he picked up and examined the paper ball. Raki didn't say anything but quickly put another slip of chakra paper into his hand and said, "Again." Naruto pushed chakra into the paper, and just like before, it split in half, with one half burning to a crisp, while the other crumpled into a ball. Raki just stared at Naruto, silently contemplating the situation as he either rubbed his chin. After a few minutes, Raki sighed before saying, "You are just a bunch of surprises, aren't you, Kit? You have 3 chakra elements: Futon, Raiden, and Kaden. Now you have a very high affinity towards your Raiden and Kaden affinities." Naruto tilted his head, and, "So?" Raki smacked his pupil. "Baka, most jonin only have 2 elements after years of training. To see 2 affinities in a child is rare, and 3 is close to impossible." Raki began to frown. "This also brings up the question of what the Kyuubi is doing inside of your body." Naruto began to get worried. Anytime they talked about the fox, he got worried. How could he not when that thing had been the cause of all the pain he had experienced? "So what are we going to do about it?" "Not we, Kit. You," Raki said as looked up at the clouds, a quirk he picked up when he was debating with himself on an important matter. He looked back down at his shocked student, before, in a blur of speed, moved behind his student. "You're gonna have to deal with it and him yourself." Before Naruto could get another word in, Raki delivered a quick chop to his troika, knocking him out cold. Raki looked at his unconscious student before picking him up, and slowly placing him against a nearby tree. "Hope the kid and the fur ball get along," Raki muttered to himself, "or this is just going to be a huge waste of time." The first thing that Naruto awoke to was the sound of dripping water. Drip, drip, drip. When he opened his eyes, he could see that he was no longer in the green field he was this morning. He now lay in a pool of cold, murky water close to a foot deep. As he picked himself up from the floor, he realized that none of his clothes were wet, meaning that either this was a genjutsu, or he was somewhere else. As his eyes adjusted to the light of the tunnel, he could see his surroundings more clearly. Surrounding him were many old rusted walls with small pipes that ran in every direction. While in the smaller pipes, a small blue tint could be seen, the larger and more noticeable pipes seemed to pulsate a crimson light as it was pumped through. Deciding that he should find way out of here, Naruto headed down the long corridor, making sure to keep the noise to a minimum. He had no idea where he was or how he had gotten there. The last thing he remembered was Raki knocking him out, but he wouldn't leave him in a place like this, right? And what was that about? Deal with him yourself, crap. How the hell was he going to talk to a giant chakra monster in his stomach? Naruto stopped when he heard noise. Closer observation identified it as heavy breathing. As Naruto began to follow the sounds, they became louder and heavier, and the room temperature seemed to skyrocket. At the end of the corridor was a room shining the same crimson light he had seen running through the pipes. When Naruto peeked into the room, he gasped. Inside was a colossal cage, with great iron bars that fell down from the ceiling. Across the center of the bars was a paper tag with the kanji, seal, written on it. Naruto knew what this room was. This was a seal, this was the Shikafuin, but more importantly, this was where the Kyuubi lived. Naruto tried to get a glimpse of what was in the cage, but could not see far enough in the eerie light. Come closer, a small child's voice giggled. Naruto reluctantly stepped forward. You're gonna have to get closer than that, the voice said again, but this time with a laugh. Okay, this is scaring the shit out of me, though Naruto as he was sweating bullets. Either a small child had somehow gotten locked in here too, or it was the fox trying to play games with him. Naruto took a deep breath, calming his nerves, before speaking in a steady voice, enough Kyuubi, I know it's you. Ah, you're no fun. The voice started to lower and become more malevolent, just a couple more steps and I could have gotten a meal. But oh well, I guess if you did fall for that then you would be a pitiful choice as my container. The nonchalance of the tone made Naruto flinch. How can he talk so calmly about eating someone? A large eye opened inside the darkness of the cage. The iris was a bloody crimson, while the pupil was a slit. Why don't we do this the old-fashioned way? Kyuubi smiled, showing off his set of sharp canines. How about you come here and run around for a bit in my cage? I always did enjoy a good chase. Maybe some other time. Naruto spoke as he tightened his fists to stop him from running straight at the thing that had been the cause of all his pain. I need some answers, and unfortunately you are the one who has them. The Biju chuckled. My kid, I thought you had learned that you had to rely on yourself for answers. Or at least that is what you should have learned from the geezer. Naruto stayed silent as Kyuubi continued. How did it feel to learn that you had been lied to by Gigi? I really don't have to ask because I saw it for myself. The hate, the feeling of betrayal, the thirst for revenge. Shut up, Naruto muttered, a shadow across his eyes. The Kyuubi looked at him in mock confusion. Say something, Kit. You will have to speak up. I said shut up. Naruto yelled at the giant kitsune. Never blame Gigi because it is all your fault. If you didn't attack the village, I might have had a family, people would not have hurt me. Do you have any idea what kind of damage you have done? You stupid foe, but Naruto was cut off by a massive dose of killer intent. Watch your tongue, boy, Kyuubi hissed, his full-tailed form appearing. I merely stated what I saw, no need to get defensive about it. Also, I never hurt you, the villagers' own fear and misguided hate did. Naruto seemed to widen at the fox's point of view. On the contrary, the fox spoke, I was the one who healed your body from those attacks. If anything, you should be thanking me for not allowing you to die for 6 years. Naruto took a couple deep breaths to disperse his anger. Thank you, he finally said, though a bit forced, but we still have some things to discuss. Kyuubi grinned at his victory before nodding the boy to continue. Where are we? He asked first as he turned to look again at the sewer. I see no harm in telling you that, the Kyuubi mused, this is called a mindscape, a section of your mind that the seal has constructed to help us communicate. It may look like a dump, but I blame the villagers' treatment, causing you to grow up with a bastardized vision of how the world is. A large tail pointed at one of the large pipes on the ceiling. These pipes have both your small and minuscule chakra, and my overall superior chakra. From what I can tell, this seal has been siphoning off my own chakra and assimilating it with your own supply, making it continuously grow larger. Naruto nodded as he processed the fox's answer. So eventually, my reserves will merge with the rest of yours, and you will disappear. He asked hopefully. The kitsune scoffed. Kit, even if I was forcing my chakra through the seal constantly, you would not live long enough to completely merge. In other words, you're stuck with me until you die. So you still have some control of your chakra? Questioned Naruto. I'm surprised that the seal would allow that. Kyuubi grew a prideful smile. No power is absolute, Kit. The seal could not take away my entire reserve on threat of also moving some of my mind along with it. But honestly, my traits is still entering your body as we speak. Naruto's eyes widened. Wait. Your thoughts are entering my mind right now. How do I get you out? I don't want to begin thinking that I am a demon fox. He spoke worriedly. No baka. Traits, likes or dislikes, strengths and weaknesses, even affinities, Kyuubi calmly explained. For example, your whiskers and your love of ramen. When the stuff first came out, I would henge into a human so I could eat the delicious meal all day. The fox sighed dreamily and began to stare off into nothingness. Is this what I look like when I think about ramen? Naruto thought as he stared at the Lord of all Demons giggle as he thought about ramen. And my 3 affinities? Naruto asked, trying to call the biju back to reality. Kyuubi shook off his ramen-induced dream, more like 2. Seeing Naruto's confused expression, he continued, if I had not been part of your body, your affinity would have mostly likely been futon, but seeing as we are stuck together, my affinities are slowly eradicating your original element and might mix to form my Kekkei Genkei. Might? Naruto asked, dreading what he knew was going to come next. Kyuubi grinned at the blonde child in front of his cage. Yes, might. It all depends on what happens today. Naruto took a couple more forced breaths before asking, alright, the whole deal with the devil kind of thing. So what do you have in mind? Simple, kit. I give you my Kekkei Genkei and train you how to use it in my own chakra, and you help me get what I want. And what do you want exactly? Naruto was wondering what the most powerful biju in the world could want. Well, truthfully, what I want is to be set free from this abysmal cage, Kyuubi said offhandedly. Naruto was about to object when the fox continued, but from careful examination of the seal, setting me free would also kill me. So I will go with the 2 next best things, have the feelings of what it is like outdoors again, and to watch the man responsible for all this suffer a painful and horrible death. Naruto quirked his eyebrow. How can you watch the Yondaime suffer? He is already dead. The temperature of the room seemed to change from blazing heat to sub-zero. When Kyuubi spoke, his voice was harsh and cold. The Yondaime may be responsible for sealing me, but the person who tricked me into attacking that pitiful village is still alive, and I won't rest until I can use his spine as a toothpick. Naruto gulped. If there is someone who was strong enough to manipulate the Kyuubi, why would he have him try to destroy the leaf? Alright, the revenge part 1 can help with. If someone did force you to attack the leaf, then he is the reason for my horrible childhood, but how do you plan on helping you feel the outside again? The room temperature resumed its previous unbearable temperature and Kyuubi spoke as if nothing had happened. Well, that's easy. All you have to do is rip off a corner of the seal. What? Screamed Naruto, but even if I made the smallest tear in that seal, the rest would slowly fall apart, causing you to be released. Geez, relax, kit, the Kyuubi said, a large sweat drop coming down his head. Besides, the 4th seal has so many backups, that ripping of a little piece will barely weaken the cage. Tell you what, since I am feeling so generous today, I will sweeten the deal. I will throw in telling you about my previous container. Naruto adopted a confused expression, still slightly against the idea of altering the seal. Why would I want to know that? It might be better if I tell you her name first, the fox mused as he pretended to think. Her name was Uzumaki Kushina, or what you would have called her, Ka-san. Naruto's eyes grew to the size of dinner plates. Why, you mean she was my mother? Naruto was barely able to keep the tears of joy of discovering his parentage under control. Yes, kit, your mother, the Kyuubi spoke in a calm voice, and I am giving you the opportunity to get to know her. She may be gone, but I have a stockpile of memories of her. That is, if you want to know, the Kyuubi baited. Wiping all doubt from his mind, Naruto appeared in front of the seal. How much should I rip off? The Kyuubi gave a toothy grin at the boy's enthusiasm. About the size of your thumb, but you might want to brace yourself. When Naruto ripped the piece of paper, at first he felt nothing, but that quickly when red chakra engulfed him, spreading pain throughout his entire body. Wah, what is this? Naruto hissed. That is why I told you to brace yourself. The Kyuubi chided the blonde. I might as well finish my part of the deal. Kushina was exactly like you. Brash, stubborn, loud, and obnoxious, the self-named queen of pranks. In truth, the only difference I see between yours and her personality is that while you favor orange, she favored red. Though Naruto was in a great deal of pain, he allowed a small smile to cross his face. Thank you, Kyuubi-san. Those were his last words as he drifted off into dreamless sleep, leaving a stunned Kyuubi. Kyuubi-san, huh? The fox chuckled to himself. The kid may have promise after all. The Kyuubi then left to begin his surprise to the kid when he woke up. Your child will not be weak, Kushina-san. I owe you that much. When Naruto awoke, his entire body felt sore. He groaned as he pushed himself up to a sitting position. He then began to go over all that had happened. Was it all a dream? Suddenly a familiar voice spoke inside his head. No, kid, it was all real. Kyuubi, Naruto said, looking around, trying to find the location of the voice. Wow, kid, just when I was this close to acknowledging that you have some brains, you had to go baka on me. Don't you remember our deal? Everything you see, feel, hear, and touch, so will I. The only response he got back was a grumble and something that sounded like, Kitsune Tem. Great, kid, you're up. Naruto turned to see his master, Raki, leaning on a tree chewing some pocky. If you had slept any longer, I would have gotten to go through with my plan to use you to hit on nurses at the hospital. You really need to wake up faster. Thanks, I'll remember that when you knock me out next time, Naruto said sarcastically, which Raki just held up his hands in mock defense. Sorry, kid, but it had to be done. The only way to meet your Biju without previous contact is to either be unconscious, or in a life or death experience, and believe me, you would have looked a lot worse if I had thrown you off a cliff. Choosing to ignore his sensei's comment, Naruto steadily stood up. Well, in the end it worked. Raki's face lost all playfulness as he entered his ninja mode, waving at Naruto to continue. Naruto then went on to talk about his meeting with the Kyuubi, the deal they had made, and the discovery of his birth mother. Throughout the explanation, Raki just stayed silent, every so often nodding his head. When Naruto had finished, Raki sighed. Well, I guess I was correct about one of your parents, but the name, Uzumaki, should tip me off sooner. Naruto glared at his teacher. So you knew and didn't tell me? Raki just sent a glare back. It was only a thought. What if I had been wrong and had brought up your hopes for nothing? Naruto flinched before looking down at his feet. Sorry about that. Raki's glare lightened upon seeing Naruto's reaction, and gave the boy a smile. Just take it easy, kid. It must be tough to learn about your family considering the life you had, but what I would really like to know is the Kekkei Genkai that Kyuubi-san talked about. In a way it is pure genius, mused Kyuubi. By combining my Raiden and my Kaden chakra types, I have created something I like to call a Kai Inazuma. It is generally an undefeatable element. Futon attacks that would normally beat a Raiden attack, actually increases its power. Also, when the attack hits, it causes a burn that spreads throughout the body, slowly turning your opponent's chakra system to ash. In simpler terms, all of your Raiden justice are a lot stronger than normal. Naruto relayed what the fox had said to Raki, who began to grin in anticipation. Well, good news, bad news, Kit. The good news is that Kumo is known for their Raiden justice, the bad news is that your training just got a whole lot harder. Without warning, Raki threw a paper bomb at Naruto's feet, which barely gave him enough time to jump out of the blast range. Turning to look at his teacher, who had a sadistic gleam in his eye, said, You should run now, Kit. Naruto paled and Kyuubi began to laugh. Oh, this is going to be fun. Kakashi walked down the main street of Konoha reading his Ika Ika. If one were to quickly glance at the man, they would see nothing different from the day before, but to those who knew him, they could see that he was troubled. Things had not been going well for Konoha, Naruto's death had caused a drastic change to the people he knew. After his mission to find Naruto's killers, he had found them quite quickly. But instead of putting up a fight, they just walked through the street, yelling to the crowds of their deed. Many cheered. When their trial was brought up, despite some of the clans and the Sandaime, the civilian court had issued them a pardon. Counselor Haruno had even recommended that they be promoted to Jonin for doing a civil service. It took both Kakashi and Guy to stop Kurenai from trying to place one of her most horrifying genjutsus on her. That night there were parties throughout the streets celebrating the true demon's death. Seeing as the boy was dead, the Third's law no longer had any sway with the villagers, who proceeded to tell their children the so-called truth about Naruto, causing two sides to form, the ones who thought that he was really a demon in disguise, and the ones who saw him as the protector of the village, forever holding the Kyuubi at bay. Kakashi's single eye narrowed a bit as he thought of the villagers. Over the past 2 years he had grown to hold a slimmer of hate towards the ones he was sworn to protect. He now only spoke with a select group of Jonin outside of missions. To make matters worse, his Anbu service almost up, and would soon have to quit to become a Jonin sensei for the last Uchiha. The Sandaime who was once ever kind and compassionate was gone. In his place was a powerful leader, who would do anything to protect the village. Or at least to some, Kakashi mused as the Sandaime had kept his warm smile for his Anbu family, and some of the Jonin. Guy had become even more enthralled into his own youth, as he trained, fought, and challenged Kakashi to menial tasks more and more often. When asked why, he would just say that he was reclaiming the youth that should have been Naruto's. The Ichirakus, when they had heard about Naruto's death, had closed the store for 2 weeks. When it reopened, a small shelf was set behind the counter, with a young Ayame and Naruto smiling at the camera, with a large bowl of ramen in front of them. Anyone who insulted the boy, or the shelf was immediately kicked out. Kakashi admired them for staying so strong even in the face of darkness. Kurenai was the most affected out of everyone. She felt that she had failed Kushina and proceeded to push herself further and further into her work. An all too similar reaction to Kakashi. While she had always been well reserved with her emotions, she completely withdrew from outside contact with everyone but her best friend, Anko, Kakashi, Guy, and Asuma, who had returned from his time outside of the village, and when he had heard of Kushina's child's death, was set to leave again. When Kakashi looked up from his book, he realized that he had walked all the way to the Hokage's monument, but more specifically, an iron shield welded into the rock. On the shield was written in bright orange letters, "Here lies the spirit of Uzumaki Naruto, let his spirit protect us like he did with the Kyuubi in his life." This was the only thing that the Sandaime had been able to get Naruto, and even still it was vandalized. Kakashi wiped off some of the grime before placing a steaming hot bowl of ramen on the altar. Eat up Naruto. Kekkei Genkei. Blood Limit. Akai Inazuma. Red Lightning. 2 figures stood across from each other on an open plain. One was a man close to his 30s, while the other was a boy, roughly 10 years old in age with blonde spiky hair. He wore black baggy pants, which to the eye it appeared that all of the pockets were empty. But, to the eyes of a trained ninja, one could tell that the entire inside of each pocket was brimming with storage seals. The boy also wore a tattered, dark orange muscle shirt with a white lightweight, zip-up sweatshirt, with gray storm clouds running down the arms. The two opponents were Raki and Naruto, nearly 3 years after the first contact with the Kyuubi. Raki smirked, then signaled Naruto to begin, at which point the blonde gave a quick calculative glance around the area before charging. Naruto jumped at his teacher with the intent to kill, aiming a punch at Raki's head. Raki easily moved, dodged the attack and went for the unguarded side of Naruto's body with a quick chop to the neck. However, Naruto saw this coming and grabbed Raki's wrist, and used its momentum to pull him over his shoulders. When Raki was right on top of his back, Naruto jumped into the air, twisted, and tossed his sensei into the ground. Naruto grinned at his accomplishment, but it quickly melted away when he saw Raki standing in a crater, picking the dirt off his nails and looking quite bored. When Naruto landed a couple of feet away from Raki, he glared at the fact that he was barely taking him seriously, but quickly calmed himself to think up a strategy to defeat him. However, he did not have this luxury, because just then Raki appeared in front of him, engaging him in a fierce series of jabs and kicks. Naruto dodged the ones he could, but still a few managed to hit him in the gut, knocking the wind out of him. After a few minutes of dodging, Naruto finally managed to get far enough away from Raki to place his plan into action. Thinking fast, he quickly produced 4 Raiden Bushinens, which moved to various locations around Raki. When all of them were in position, the clones to the north threw a group of kunai straight at Raki. He dodged them easily, but then at the last moment noticed a small hissing noise coming from one of the projectiles. He turned to see a seal tied to one of the kunai. Paper bomb, he thought before jumping out of the blast range. When he looked back, he saw another cluster of paper bombs flying at him, which he dodged again. What is he planning? Raki thought as he proceeded to play cat and mouse while trying to watch all 4 Naruto, who all had a similar grin plastered on their faces. After a while Raki was getting irritated, so this time when he saw the kunai coming, he took out his own kunai and started to bat away the barrage, before using his expert aim to throw and aim his kunai through the paper bomb's hole, pushing it towards one of the Narutos. When the paper bomb went off, the clone was discharged in a spark of lightning. Raki slowly stood up, taking some breaths to relax himself while he looked at the remaining clones, who had all lost their smirks. Nice plan to begin with, Kit. He complimented. You use your Bushinens as markers, to continuously throw explosives at me, keeping me moving, slowly causing me to tire and make it easier for you to hit me. However, it is going to take a lot more than that if you want to surpass me, he boasted. But his fun was cut short when he felt a presence coming at him from behind. When he turned, he was facing 2 Naruto clones rushing at him. When did he make those? Raki thought as he surveyed the battleground. His eyes soon fell upon a group of kunai that had a few less than the others. So, he not only used the kunai as a way to keep me moving, but also to plant some traps for me if I ever escaped. Damn, this is starting to get interesting. Raki grinned at the progress of his student. The first clone jumped at Raki trying to bind his knees, which Raki jumped into the air to avoid. Then the second sprang after him going for a quick kick at his left shoulder. Raki grabbed Naruto's fist, then spun to throw the clone away, sending him and the clone in opposite directions. What Raki was not expecting was for a Naruto to break through the ground, with a charged up Raikyu between 2 kunai. If you think that I'm too much of a coward to attack you head on, then you got another thing coming. Naruto then threw both kunai at Raki, who could do nothing to stop them as they headed right towards his chest. When they hit, there was a flash of lightning, as sparks danced around Raki's body, before he hit the ground. Naruto watched for a second, keeping his guard up just in case Raki was faking it. But when after 2 minutes neither had moved, he assumed it was done. Wow, Naruto said as he scratched his head, I thought it would be harder than that. Just then, he felt the familiar touch of a cold blade under his neck. It never is, Kit. Naruto cursed. Kneeling right behind him was Raki, with one kunai pressed to his jugular, while the other was pressing down hard on his kidneys, both vital spots. As I said before, your planning and strategy was good, continued Raki as he pressed the kunai a bit deeper into his throat, making it a bit harder for Naruto to breathe. If you were fighting a Chunin-level shinobi, you would have won with that combo, constantly moving your opponent around, making them think that they are making the choices to jump where they want when really, you are positioning them closer and closer to you, so you can jump out and surprise them. However, you forgot that since I am considered to be AS rank nin, those tactics would do little against me. Also, when you dropped your guard around my body, you left yourself open to attack, Raki chided as he removed the blades from Naruto's neck, allowing him to breathe easier. The beginning and the end of a battle are the most important parts, said Raki as he proceeded to readjust his bones with a loud series of cracks. We are ninja, we never play by the rules, so odds are we are never going to go down alone. Naruto nodded as his eyes were focused on a blade of grass near his feet. Now then, Naruto looked up to see the devious smile of his teacher. I believe we made a deal this time about whether or not you would win, All the blood from Naruto's face instantly drained. In seconds he was at Raki's feet, begging for him to reconsider. Please Arrow Masuda. Anything but that. Do you need any help hitting on the women at the bathhouses? Market. Anywhere. Just anything but that. Raki's grin grew larger. Nope kid. This was the bet. If you won, I would not go to another brothel for 2 weeks, but if I won, oh the excitement is killing me. He began to laugh at Naruto's horrified expression. I'll say it slowly just to savor the moment. No. Ramen. For 2 weeks. Naruto's world shattered when he heard those words. No. He screamed as large anime tears fell down his face. Damn it kid, do you see what you've done? Ranted the Kyuubi from Naruto's mindscape. Why would you bet such an important treasure? Now what are we going to do? The fox was near a mental breakdown of its own at the thought of being separated from his precious. I had no idea he would follow through, I swear, Naruto thought back as he cried over the loss of the first love of his life, ramen. Seeing that this was not going to end soon, Raki shrugged before grabbing his student by the hood, and dragging him back to the village. Naruto glared at the bowl of udon in front of him. When the pair had arrived in town, they had decided to grab something to eat. They were currently on a small coastal town of U. Raki was leaving to go gather some information for Kumo for a couple of months, so this would be Naruto's temporary base of operations where he would eat, sleep, and train. Naruto shifted his gaze to his sensei, which just to irk him, had gotten a bowl of miso ramen, his favorite. Now many people would argue that there was not a ramen flavor that he didn't like, but Naruto would just respond by throwing a couple of shuriken at them. It was not his fault that all ramen was delicious. Raki ignored the glares his student was giving him and continued to focus on his meal. After taking a purposely loud slurp, he turned a lazy eye and analyzed Naruto. His build was larger, anyone could tell from just a glance. His eyes darted around the room at a fast pace while his fingers twitched at the slightest irregularity. Across his face was a black mask that covered the nose and mouth. After multiple instances of different Naruto fan clubs popping up in the towns that they had visited, much to Raki's displeasure, Naruto had started to wear a mask to keep the fangirls away. They were getting smarter though, they had started to track his location. After Raki had cleaned his bowl, he stood up and walked to the door. He threw some keys over his shoulder, which Naruto caught without hesitation. Those are the keys to the room I booked. It is already paid for, so don't piss them off. He turned back so he faced his student. I have something I want you to work on for the next month, so when you are done, find me. Raki then popped out of existence, leaving nothing more than a smoke cloud. Naruto sighed as he realized that this was another part of his training, being able to find people by their scent. He paid for his and Raki's meal before taking to the rooftops in pursuit. After half an hour, Naruto had followed Raki's trail to a small clearing in the forest, surrounding the town. There waiting was Raki, holding a blunt katana, and a large scroll. The katana was quite bare. Naruto could tell that it was a practice blade, a substitute for a real blade when the wielder was ready. However, the scroll was a different story. The bindings were a rusted red, while the parchment looked faded but still legible. Along the side was a red fox with its tail splitting off to intertwine around the scroll. Finally, Kit, now we can begin, said Raki, while Naruto shot him a not so subtle glare, but it quickly disappeared when Raki's face schooled itself. Today, Kit, you will be taking another step towards replacing me as the Kitsune Sennin. Raki rolled out the scroll on the ground. Naruto could see Raki's name written on the parchment, along with 4 or more other fading signatures. This is the Kitsune summoning contract, Raki said as he traced his finger along his own name. I found this on my travels, and was one of the rare few allowed to sign it. The foxes are very picky in their summoners, and as you can see, few have ever been chosen. They want their partners to be strong, cunning, and have good intentions, and if they choose you as a summoner, then you will have a strong ally. Naruto nodded, soaking in all the information as Raki continued. Foxes, while not one of the strongest with brute strength, are the smartest out of all the other contracts, constantly tricking and confusing their enemies into falling into traps. They have the uncanny ability to see through genjutsus, along with casting them, and are excellent trackers and masters in stealth. In other words, they suit you perfectly. Raki looked up at the sky. The sun had already gone down and a shallow dusk had appeared over the trees. You need to sign your name in blood, then I will show you the hand seals to summon. Get them the first time because I will only be showing you once, he said as he watched Naruto quickly tear off some skin on his index finger before quickly writing down his name. Alright, now here comes the hard part, whether they accept you or not, said Raki as he quickly showed Naruto the hand seals before he tried it on his own. Kuchio's no jutsu, yelled Naruto as he slammed his hand into the ground, causing an array of seals to appear. The seals soon disappeared in a puff of smoke, and there in its place was an orange fox around the size of small dog. The fox had an iron plate on its chest with the kanji for fire on it. Hiya Raki-san, how's it been? What did ya call me for? The fox said with a large grin on his face. Raki smiled at the small fox. Pretty good Itazura, but I wasn't the one who summoned you, he was, he said pointing at Naruto. Hi, Naruto smartly responded, still mesmerized about what he had just done. The fox, now known as Itazura, narrowed his eyes at Naruto, slowly observing the boy. He then walked up to Naruto's feet, before jumping to his shoulder in one bound. When he was properly seated, he stared intently at Naruto's eyes, while his tail explored the rest of his head. When his tail went over Naruto's nose, he sneezed, but this did not even distract the fox. After 2 minutes of silence, Itazura said in a jovial tone, he looks alright, Two-san might be okay with this one. He doesn't look like he frightens easily. Naruto was unsure on whether that was a compliment or an insult, so he gave the intellectual response of, thanks. Itazura just grinned back. Don't mention it, just don't be a weakling. I would hate to have my familiar be a little sap that gets beat up all the time. This got Naruto pissed. What did you say, furball? He tried to smash his fist into the small fox's head, but it quickly jumped away from his shoulder onto a nearby tree branch, still grinning. Oh, he has quite the temper, Raki-san. Yes, I do believe I will have a lot of fun with him as my familiar, Itazura said as he looked at Raki, who just sighed. Just be careful, Itazura. Get too far on his bad side and you will regret it. He is almost as good a prankster as you, Raki said with a shiver, as he remembered the time he had gotten on the blonde's bad side and had ended up with many bruises and broken bones from an organized attack by the female populace of town. Naruto, still growling at Itazura, asked, Raki, who is the furball and what does he mean by familiar? Itazura just looked at Naruto, then gave a sheepish grin. Oh, how rude of me, I forgot to introduce myself. My name is Itazura, second heir to the Kitsune clan after my father, Kitsunebosu. Naruto nodded in understanding as Itazura continued, and by familiar, well, it means that I will be the main person you contact when you summon. For summoners in our clan, depending on who is your familiar, it will determine your social class and the amount of respect you hold. The classes go from the boss, to the heirs, to the warriors, to scouts, and then messengers, with the first being the most respected, and the later being the least. When Itazura had finished his explanation, Naruto thought it over. So the warriors, scouts, and messengers will listen to me? Yes and no, Itazura said. Yes, they will listen to you, but not completely, because you will still have to gain their respect, and also with father, you will need to earn his if you want any help from him. So what can you do? Naruto asked as he looked over the fox in front of him. Finally, a worthwhile question, Itazura said in his playful tone. Being a clan heir, I am required to know all of the professions that my clan offers, so I have been taught to be a jack of all trades of sorts. In combat I am proficient, and slowly gaining progress. Genjutsus are a piece of cake for me, and my stealth is well known around my clan for the numerous pranks I pull. He. Badagato must still be cleaning paint out of his hair. Naruto smiled at the thought of having another prankster as a friend. Well, I can gladly say that we have some things in common. I will be an honor to work with you, Itazura. Just call me Naruto. Itazura gave a small, sincere smile. The same, Naruto. Summon me later and we will work out all the details, but until then, Yane. And in a puff of smoke, he was gone. Raki cleared his throat to gain his student's attention. Well, I must say that you got lucky there, kid. Having an heir as the familiar is a major pull in that clan, but now on to the second reason I brought you here. Raki pulled the katana out of the ground and tossed it to Naruto. In Kumo, to become Jonin rank, it is required that you have some sort of skill in Kenjutsu, Raki said as he began to pull up his own sleeve to reveal a ceiling tattoo. When he pushed blood on the ink, a small katana, easily 4 feet in length appeared. The design was simple, almost identical to the one Naruto had, but the handle was wrapped in red of black tape, while the blade had a long red tail running up it. Each sword has its own name, which is normally given by the wielder or by the master. For example, my sword's name is Chio, or Bloodtail, basically because I slaughtered over 200 ninja with it. Naruto widened his eyes, unsure whether to be awed or horrified. This, however, is a practice blade. You will not get your own until you can wield a sword properly. So until then I want you to read and practice the Kenjutsu scrolls one left in your room along with your normal routine while I am gone. When I return I will observe whether Kenjutsu is an appropriate fighting style for you, Raki said as he began to walk towards the harbor. I will be back in around a month, so until then no slacking off, got that, Kit? I want to be completely blown away when I return. Then he disappeared in a shunshin, leaving Naruto to his thoughts. Hi sensei, Naruto said quietly, before he rushed to his room to begin reading the scrolls. Amayuri Ringo was annoyed. For the past 2 years of her life, she had been on the run from the hunter Nin of Kiri, trying to keep a low profile to all of the bandits and other hidden villages so she would not have any more trouble, and finally, she was no closer to finding a cure. Amayuri was part of the few Kiri no Shinobugatana Shichinen Shu, and also the only female member. Her skills with her swords, the kibas, were legendary, saying that she could cut through anything with a single swipe of her twin blades. However, with the start of the Bloodline Wars, many of the members were suspected of carrying Kekkei Genkai and were either hunted or killed. Since Amayuri used a flow of Raiden chakra to enhance her strikes, she was to be brought up for questioning, then execution on her supposed Kekkei Genkai. However, before she would let that happen, she joined Zabuza Momochi, a fellow member in a coup d'état of the Mizukage. However, their efforts were in vain as Yagura not only defeated them, but also managed to poison Amayuri's chakra pathways, making it almost impossible to mold or control chakra. After she had escaped Kiri, she discovered from a traveling doctor that the poisoning was slowly killing her, and that she would not make it much longer. Her estimated time was almost 2 months before she hit the dirt. She observed her surroundings for the 20th time since she had entered the bar, a trait she had picked up after being on the run for so long. She was in a small coastal town in Yu and was planning on staying for about a month before moving on. It was not good to stay in one place for more than that, otherwise the hunter Nin would find her. Amayuri sighed as she took another sip of her drink and flicked a strand of her light blue hair away from her face. She was wearing a simple kimono where the light imprints of waves could be seen. On her sides was the twin blade, kiba, which she would never take off. Drinking had become sort of a habit for Amayuri. Why not? In her opinion, if she was going to die, might as well be drunk off her as well. She hated that side of her. It was just so depressing. Even if she was having a good time, that voice would pierce her thoughts and remind her that it was the end for her. After slowly staggering out of the bar, she proceeded to make her way down the busy marketplace. Even when drunk, she had the talent to avoid the commoners and fishermen as they went on with their daily lives. She had just reached the inn she was staying at when she felt something odd. It felt like chakra but had a weird pull to it. It felt wild and untamed, not the normal charka signature from a hunter nin, who normally kept their restores hidden or had a very small one to begin with. Against her better judgment, she decided to investigate and took to the trees in the direction of the chakra. When she arrived, she was surprised to see a training ground, completely covered in craters and scorch marks. From Amayuri's observation, the damage seemed to be done by Raiden and Kaden Justice. She then began to look around for the person who had caused this damage and was shocked once again to see a boy, no older than 10, slashing at a tree with a dull katana. Amayuri could see that he was not that good, but he did have potential. The boy stood in a white sweatshirt and ninja pants, breathing heavily as sweat dripped down his body. Though the boy's form was horrible, he did have the strength, speed, and endurance to become a powerful swordsman. Amayuri watched for close to an hour as the boy continuously practiced different slashes into the tree. As she watched, she soon concluded that the form was the problem. It was not that he did not have the talent, but that the form was built for someone who had strong center gravity and could take hits but then quickly counter with their own. The boy's body was built to deal quick and devastating blows to an opponent, while keeping close enough to easily block any attack that they tried. This was a similar problem that Amayuri used to have, because most sword styles were as if dancing with their enemies. Hers was quick and brutal, planning on ending the battle in the quickest and most damaging manner. When it was close to noon, the blonde boy finally stopped and moved over to his pack, only to pull out a box of dangos. Amayuri's stomach growled. With her latest drinking binge, she was now strapped for cash. She would normally just do a quick mission or something easier, but you had never had many of those types of missions, so she was stuck. Just then a brilliant idea popped into her head. As she continued to think it through, a small grin made its way onto her face. Oh, this is going to be fun, she thought, before jumping to meet the small blonde. Naruto angrily popped a dango into his mouth. Raki had left 3 days ago and he had not made any improvement on his kenjutsu. After he had left, Naruto had gone straight to the room and spent the entire night reading the scroll until he could recite them by memory. But even if he knew about the style, it was far different from being able to do it. There is more to kenjutsu than just style, Kit, said Kyuubi inside the mindscape. Over the past years, Kyuubi and Naruto had somewhat bonded, being able to call themselves the lightest meaning of the word, friends. Even though Kyuubi constantly made brash and comments about many of the women Naruto saw, causing him to never see the woman the same again, he would put in a useful comment or some words of encouragement every once in a while. From what I can see, you are just not right for this style. It requires a strong base, while you like to jump around and randomly attack vitals. Naruto nodded at the fox's words, and was about to reach and grab another dango when he found that the box was now empty. Looking around, he soon noticed a young woman who was sitting on a stump of a tree, eating his dangos. She had light blue hair with pale hazel eyes. Her kimono was plain except for a light range of waves that were the texture of the dress. Her stance, though relaxed, expressed a feeling of respect. Thanks for the snack, the woman said as she finished off the last of the treat. Amayuri again re-examined the boy. Now that she was closer, she could see that he had a slim, muscular build, and sapphire blue eyes. When she saw the whisker marks, she had to beat her inner fangirl with a stick to keep herself from glomping the poor boy. When Naruto finally regained his shock of being snuck up on, he took an offensive stance, ready for attack. Who are you and what are you doing here? The light blue-haired woman gave a soft smile, which lowered Naruto's guard a bit. My name is Amayuri, and who are you? Naruto, but you still haven't answered my question, he said, but as he begun to pull of a kunai, he felt two iron blades, one on his neck, and the other on his stomach. Amayuri was standing right behind him, holding the swords in place, her kind smile replaced with a scowl. It is not very polite to pull a dagger on a stranger, Naruto-san. Her voice was so cold that Naruto shivered. But considering that this is probably your first actual meeting with a woman and your whiskers are so cute, we will forget you did that. Amayuri's tone had changed from ice cold to happy as she removed her swords from Naruto's neck, but not before pinching his cheek. After releasing his breath, Naruto looked back at Amayuri. Anyo, but what are you doing here, Amayuri-san? His tone much more polite and controlled than before. She gave him the same kind smile as she did before. That was good, Naruto-kun. Well, to answer your question, I was walking near here when I heard you training and decided to take a peek. I was quite impressed with the jutsus, but your kenjutsu seems a bit lacking, doesn't it? Naruto's mouth dipped into a frown on the last part. I don't know what I'm doing wrong. I am copying the style exactly like in the scroll, but it just feels wrong. Amayuri nodded at his statement. You aren't doing anything wrong. Naruto's eyes moved to Amayuri. It is just that you are not built for this style of kenjutsu. While the style I saw you trying to use focuses on defense rather than attacks, you yourself like to attack more, and not give the time for the opponent to attack. Naruto's eyes widened after hearing that, as it was the same thing that Kyuubi said. So, if I find another style that fits me, I could use that instead, he asked hopefully. Yep, which pretty much brings me to why I am here, Amayuri said as she put her swords back into their sheaths. Here's my deal. Currently I am a bit low on cash and cannot afford my necessities, so if you pay for the things I need, I will help you with your training. I'll even throw in some lessons on how to treat a lady. It will be pretty fun if I remember the last time I taught it. Amayuri giggled as she thought how she had forced all of the Kiri no Shinobugatana Shichininshu to learn her class, on threat of being castrated. While Naruto watched the giggling woman in front of him, he pondered how he was going to answer. Do it, kid, the Kyuubi's voice echoing through his thoughts. Why should I? Naruto thought back. Why should I take an offer from a woman I just met? 1. You are absolutely horrible at kenjutsu, and she is offering to help you. 2. By the way she is giggling about the etiquette lessons, I would not want to see what would happen if you refused, the Kyuubi put it shortly. After Amayuri had finished her giggles, Naruto accepted her deal, and they both shook on it. So anything I should be improving on in this style? Naruto asked. Amayuri took the katana out of his hands. She moved her hands expertly down the blade, changed grips, and after 2 minutes, she said, nothing of value, and threw it up into the air, before obliterating it with a Raiden jutsu. Naruto looked at her wide-eyed. What the hell was that for? He screamed, to which Amayuri just smacked him on the head with the butt of her sword. Rule 1 for etiquette. Women are always right. You will survive a lot longer if you take that to heart. Second, that sword was pointless for the style I am going to be teaching you. She then pulled up the hem of her kimono to show a sealing tattoo on her right calves. When she added blood, 2 swords, almost identical to the ones around her waist, appeared in her hands. She then proceeded to give both swords to Naruto, and make a Mizu Bushinin that got in a fighting stance. Follow my clone's movements, while I make adjustments. Naruto wanted to clarify, but his head still hurt from that last hit, so he just went along with it. It continued like that for about a week. Naruto would spend hours mimicking Amayuri's Bushinin, while the real Amayuri would correct his footing, grips, etc. if they needed any. After that they had moved to spars, where Amayuri would train Naruto to adapt during the fight to different types of attacks. At about sunset every day, they would finish training and Naruto would take Amayuri out to dinner, to learn table manners, social etiquette, and other valued social traits. Amayuri had also forbid Naruto to wear his mask in town, saying that he needed to confront his fears. She always had a good laugh as she watched him get mauled by rabid fangirls. During their time together, they had both taken a liking to each other. Naruto even began to call Amayuri, Amayuri Ne-chan. She was surprised when she first heard this, but gave him a hug in appreciation. The two were currently in a small bar, where Naruto was watching Amayuri drink herself numb. He had observed quickly that she was a heavy drinker, but the last week she had been really overdoing it. Amayuri tried to grab another drink, but before she could reach it, Naruto moved it out of her grasp. "What's going on, Amayuri Ne-chan?" he asked. He could not just leave her like this. "If you keep on drinking like that, you'll be dead by tomorrow." Amayuri looked at Naruto, silently judging whether she should tell him. After a couple of seconds, she motioned for him to follow her. After they had left the bar, they walked in silence to the spot where they had first met. Amayuri then began to loosen her top, causing Naruto to blush. "Yes, I knew this would lead to something." Kyuubi cheered from his cage. But Amayuri did not remove her entire top, she only moved the cloth away from her stomach, to reveal a long scar. Naruto could tell that there had been attempts to heal it, but the skin around it was dead and black. "I got this from fighting the Mizukage," she started, gaining Naruto's attention. "Me and another member of the Kiri no Shinobugatana Shichinen Shu tried to stage a revolt, but he defeated us and ending up poisoning me. Currently I have about a month left." Naruto looked at her in horror. He deeply cared for Amayuri, enough that he had made her one of his precious people. He could not stand to see her die. "The way I see it, I am going to die anyway, so why not leave something here that people will remember me by," said Amayuri as she tightened her kimono. "I can see it, Naruto-kun, you are going to be great, and along with my sword style, you might even be one of the top shinobi in all of the elementals. You have learned my style almost flawlessly. The only thing you need now is my final secret, and how I can cut through almost anything. But, after I show you, the heavy use of chakra will probably kill me." Tears were beginning to well up in Naruto's eyes. He tried to back away, he tried to stop her, but before he could do anything, he was pulled into a fierce hug. "Don't be Naruto-kun, if I had not met you, I would have been filled with sadness until I died. But thanks to you, I can leave in peace." She then kissed him on his forehead, and backed away. "Now the secret is to channel your Raiden chakra at a slightly wild current down the blade. Just think of a saw cutting down a tree. Then after you have that, just speeds it up." Amayuri's blades began to glow a light blue, and her breathing became heavy. She then rushed over to a group of rocks, and in an instant, the once mighty boulders were nothing more than a pile of pebbles. She collapsed after that. Naruto rushed to her aid, moving her body, trying to make it as comfortable as he could. "I will miss you, Amayuri Ne-chan," he said, tears beginning to roll down his cheeks. She gave him that same warm smile she had when they had met. "I will miss you too, Ototo," and with her last bit of strength, she pushed the kibas into his hands, before death finally took her. Naruto stayed there for a while before he actually moved. He slowly dug a large hole at the base of the tree that he had met her at, and then gently lowered Amayuri's corpse into the ground. When the hole was filled again, he carved her name into the bark of the tree, and stabbed the two training swords into the dirt. This was the scene that Raki came by when he returned to find his student, staring at a tree with two swords at the base of it. When he moves closer, he recognized the name and to his shock, looked to find the twin kibas, hoisted at Naruto's waist. After carefully reading the situation, he moved over to Naruto and put his hand on his shoulder. Naruto didn't even jump, he just looked up at Raki with red puffy eyes, to which he responded with a somber smile. "She's in a better place now, Kit," he said softly, to which Naruto nodded before, turning around and walking to the inn to grab his stuff. Now would not be the best time to tell him, thought Raki as he watched Naruto leave. Flashback. Raki sat in a lively bar, off the coast of Hai no Kuni. There was a bachelor party going on in the background and the mood was drunk and happy. Raki looked over to his escort, a busty brunette with light brown eyes. She wore a tight one-piece made out of light fabric, that was only held up by her giant D-cups. "Why don't we find a more comfortable place?" he said, his voice dripping with lust. The woman gave him a playful smirk. "Anything for you, Raki-sama." He grinned as he led the way to an empty room upstairs. When they had arrived, he quickly locked the door and placed a silencing seal on the wall. "So what were you able to find out?" Raki asked, his previous demeanor gone. "You were right about the village hating him," the woman said as she moved to sit on the bed. "They still celebrate his death." Raki frowned. "Amy, does anyone at all miss him?" he asked, trying to find a bit of good news. The woman, now known as Amy, nodded. "Not that much, but they are there. The Hokage has completely changed since he left. Also, there are a couple of Jonins that I have seen acting a bit saddened whenever his name is brought up. But the biggest thing I've seen is this small ramen stand, where they actually have a photo of him in the store, and anyone who insults it is kicked out." Raki smiled at that, making a mental note to someday find and pay the family handsomely for their kindness. "And what about the other thing I asked?" Two shadows walked along a rocky and jagged path in Kaminari no Kuni. The sun sparked down on the abundance of mountain ranges and small rivers that meandered through the landscape. The figure in front was Samayu Raki, member of the Kumo no Sansoku, and Kitsune Sennin, while his apprentice, 12-year-old Uzumaki Naruto, walked a few feet behind him. Naruto now stood at 5 feet 4 inches, a respectable height for someone his age. His sunshine color hair had grown in length, but not to the point where it had lost its spikiness. The same black mask covered his face from the nose down, only revealing his bright sapphire blue eyes that shined with determination, and a spark of mischief. Naruto still wore his rust orange muscle shirt, along with his storm cloud sweatshirt, but had begun to wear black tape around his hands. His shinobi pants looked slightly tattered, but Naruto kept them because they still worked. And along his feet were a pair of black shinobi-style sandals. Across Naruto's back were the twin blades, the kibas, taking to wearing them everywhere just like his late Ne-chan. Over the years, Naruto's talents for the ninja arts had only grown. With help from the Kitsune clan, his stealth and genjutsu training had given the push he needed. He was now almost like a shadow, slipping in and out of buildings, mostly helping Itazura with a prank of some kind. Though he could still not cast a good genjutsu, he had been able to compromise with recognizing and dispelling C-rank genjutsus. Raki had overall helped him perfect his kenjutsu and taijutsu to the level he saw adequate. While he did not know the style, he would normally have spars with Naruto to help him during sword combat, giving him a small sort of a battle sense. In taijutsu, Naruto had begun learning the advanced katas of Raki's personal style, and was well on the way to mastering it. Kyuubi had kept to his word and had begun to teach Naruto to control his Kekkei Genkei, by slowly having him create a red stream of lightning between his thumb and index finger. Like Kyuubi had said, Naruto's futon chakra nature had all but disappeared, only making the slightest of cuts in chakra paper. When it came to adding it to jutsus, the two were deadly together, making up new ways to utilize a jutsu, making it become a diversion or increasing his power. Naruto's personality had also changed a great deal. He insisted on calling Raki, Raki-sensei, in public, only using his nickname when they were in private. Though Naruto was still the same person, he would now engage in conversations with many of the girls that they met, trying to get past the inner fangirl and meet the true self. Raki and Kyuubi often teased that Raki had somehow corrupted him and he would soon be peaking. This had caused horrible nightmares, almost as bad as when Raki brought him to a brothel for education. "Are we there yet?" Naruto asked, placing his arms behind his head as he looked up at the sky. Raki gritted his teeth. "As I said the last mile and the mile before that, we will get there when we get there." There was silence for a few minutes before Naruto asked again, how about Umph? He was cut off when he ran into Raki, who had just stopped. Raki looked back and grinned at Naruto. Yep, we are there, Kit. Welcome to Kumogakure, the most beautiful of all the hidden villages. Naruto was awed by what he saw. The city was a collection of tall mountains, with the building built into the walls. Large pathways connected the different buildings and large clouds descended atop the tips of the peaks. At the center of the village was a large glass dome, most likely the Raikage's office, along with the center of trade for the town. When Naruto looked down, he could see that the base of the mountains were brimming with activity. People walked up and down the streets, engaging in conversations about trade, school, and daily life. Amazing, isn't it, Kit? Raki said, gaining his students' attention. No matter what I see in this world, this is the most amazing. He then turned to Naruto. All right, as soon as we enter that village, there are some rules I want you to go by. Rule 1. Try to keep your true abilities secret. Deception is the key for a ninja, even from your comrades. Rule 2. Do not tell anyone that I am your sensei. To say the least, it will cause complications. In Rule 3, you will be attending the Ninja Academy for the next year before you become a full shinobi. Just try and make some friends your age. Nay, Ero Masuda, why do I need to go to the academy? I have already learned the basics, and the history you taught me should keep me up, Naruto asked, confused about why his sensei wanted him to relearn what he had spent his childhood on. Raki scoffed. I could care less what those weak pencil pushers teach you, but this is a way to learn about your future teammates and other teams. Information is the key. Naruto nodded in confirmation. Raki then turned and began to walk to the gate. I got to go clear up some things, use your passport to enter the city and do something productive. And with that he disappeared in a puff of smoke. What do you think would be a productive way to spend our time? Naruto thought to his inmate. After a couple seconds, both yelled, ramen, and left to find the nearest ramen stand. Due to Kumogakure being a mostly military-operated city, the council was made up of the few clans, the civilians who had monopolies on trade or stores, and finally the Raikage, the elders, and the two appointed members, Chiasa Ayumi and Takashi Manabu, both members of the Kumo no Sansoku. The Yondaime Raikage, and rumored to be the fastest man in all of the elemental countries, sighed as he listened to the council talk about the trade agreements and other boring subjects. He could easily be outside with Kurabi sparring, or lifting weights, but no, he had to be here and just nod or shake his head. He was brought out of his musing when one of the clan members spoke. Back to our previous discussion from last week, all attempts to find Samayu Raki, our third Sennin, have been a failure. Not surprising, said Takashi, he may be in Baka, but when it comes to stealth, there are few that can find him. What we need are the hunter nin. Frowned a bit. Takashi and Raki had always been at odds, always trying to outdo the other, whether it is at strength or social status. That is not an excuse, said another clan member. He has been missing for 6 years. We have tried again and again to have the hunter nin sent after him, but Raikage-sama refuses. He must be here to fulfill his responsibilities. Chiasa scoffed. Right, like he had a choice. You were forcing an apprentice on him. If I had the choices that you were giving him, I would hightail it out of here too. This caused a to give a small smile. Chiasa was always the median of the team, literally beating the sense into her comrades. She was always a kind and understanding person, while a bit brash. That was all we could offer, the first civilian member said. Kumo is outnumbered by the other villages in bloodlines and numbers, and we need to gain every advantage we can if war breaks out. Finally spoke. While I agree that bloodlines do not make a shinobi, they do help, but with the last attempt my father had on taking the Byakugan, the other villages are cautious of us. Which is why we need Raki back, as protection and as someone who can train the next generation, said the second clan member. I agree, said Takashi. Raki needs to do his part in passing on his minuscule amount of knowledge. Even if he has to teach a civilian family member, it will show him he should have started earlier. Chiasa just glared at Takashi but remained silent. Aside, alright fine, though I do not think that it will do much good, I will send a team of hunter nin to find my pupil. How about I just save you the time instead, sensei? A voice rang through the chamber. The council members quickly began to scan the room, until they found Samayu Raki of the Kumo no Sansoku, sitting on the ceiling eating a dango. Raki-sama, you are here, yelled one of the council members. I couldn't help but smirk. Chiasa grinned, and Takashi showed an aura of disinterest. Raki dropped down to the floor and looked around the room. Man, if I knew you were going to send the hunter nin, I would have waited to come home. Those guys can be so much fun. That is fine and all, but Raki-san, where have you been? Asked Eiji-guro, one of the elders. Why, I have been doing my part to protect Kumo, my fine wrinkled friend, Raki said, which caused Eiji to scowl. I have been traveling around the continent, making sure that there were absolutely no plots to destroy Kumo, and lucky there were none. And what did you learn on your travels? Questioned another clan member. Raki leaned in as if he was going to tell a secret. Raikage's ears only, he said, giving them a foxy grin. Though the council was annoyed by this predicament, I could not help but chuckle. His student had always loved to jerk the council around. Finally, after he had regained his composure, Eiji asked, so have you come back to fulfill your duties as a sennin? Raki just looked at him with a bored gaze. If my duties include taking one of your snot-nosed brats and training them to be a killing machine, then no. I said it before and I will say it again, those kids do not have that much potential. You have to take one sometime, Raki Sukebe, said Takashi, putting in his 2 cents. Raki sent a glare at his teammate. And why exactly do I have to do that, Takige? Throwing in his nickname to irk him. Takashi scowled at the name, but continued, it is the job of a sennin, and we must pass on the mantle to the next generation. Raki sighed because he knew that he was right. Fine, I'll take one, but not now. I want to have at least a year to relax before hell starts. A's eyes widened. That was way too easy. He had seen Raki argue over what to eat for lunch harder than this. A civilian member spoke, so who will you be training? Raki just shrugged, I'll pick next year, but I can tell you that it will not be one of your brats. I chuckled again at how Raki had knocked the pride out of the council members. Okay, it is decided, I said in a loud voice, Raki will pick an apprentice next year. Now if you excuse me, if what my student said is true, we have some things to discuss. He then jumped out of his chair, grabbed Raki and Sunshine to his office, effectively ending the meeting. When the two arrived at A's office, he quickly sent the Anbu out and activated the silencing seals around the office so that they would not be disturbed. A's face then became serious. Okay, what have you learned? And you also better explain what just happened in the council chambers. What do you mean, sensei? Raki feigned innocence. Don't give me that, arose his voice. I've seen you argue harder for toppings on food, then something that can very well change your life comes along, and you don't even try. Raki gave him a smile. Not one of his giant grins, but a true smile. You could always see through me, sensei. I won't tell you, but I will help you figure it out, because it has a lot to do with what I learned on my travels. I became intrigued and motioned Raki to continue. Alright, now what happens next year? Raki asked. I pounded his head as he thought. Most of the mind games Raki played only seemed hard, but once finding out the answer, seemed almost like child's play. The only things I can think of that happen next year is the annual visit from the daimyo, and the academy graduations. Then it all clicked inside the Raikage's head, you already have one, don't you? It was more of a statement than a question. Raki grinned before pulling out some forms from his cloak. I knew you would get it, that is why I need you to sign these. I looked over the paperwork, making sure everything was in order, and then put it on his desk. I will make sure that these get through, but there are a lot of blanks. Mainly with the child's family. Raki lost his grin and took a very serious posture. The reason for that is that this kid being on our side could lead to two different futures. And they would be. Question A. One could lead to Kumo, becoming the strongest of the elemental nations, the other could lead to the Fourth Great Shinobi War, Raki put it simply. A was shocked. War was something few joked about, especially those who had lived through it. Who are the boy's parents? He demanded, not taking any of Raki's jokes. Raki sighed. His name is Uzumaki Naruto, but in truth it is Namikaze Uzumaki Naruto, son of Kushina Uzumaki, the Akai Chishio no Habanero and Minato Namikaze, Yondaime Hokage and the Konoha no Kiro Senko. A was speechless, even a bit of blood left his face. If those two had a kid, he would be a weapon of mass destruction. Minato Namikaze was the only man he had ever faced who was faster than him. If he had a son, there was no doubt that his son would soon surpass him. How did you find him? A asked. If Naruto really were the son of those two, it would have not been easy to get him. I found him when he was 6, crucified to a cross a couple of miles outside of Konohagakure, said Raki with a bit of malice in his voice. This shocked again. Why would they do that? It makes no sense. Why would they leave the hero of Konoha's son out in the woods to die? I was horrified and disgusted that villagers would even do such a thing to a child. Sensei, Raki said, gaining his teacher's full attention, he's like Kurabi, only I think he has had it much worse. That explained it. The boy was a Jinchuriki, and they were normally hated because of what they held. But in Kumo, Kurabi had changed all that, only leaving a bit of caution when dealing with him. Are there other Jinchuriki, Niyugito, Jinchuriki of the Nibi no Nekomata? After A had regained his composure, he asked, how is Konoha dealing with all this? Honestly, they still celebrate his death, said Raki, still angered about how they treated his pupil. It seems that he was all alone there and only had a few friends, namely the Hokage, and a small ramen stand. Aside, so now Kumo is the owner of 3 Jinchuriki. You were right about the 2 possibilities we have. Raki nodded. I have brought him back to experience the last year of school and get some friends. Due to moving around a lot, he has never known that many people his age. I will keep his status and heritage a secret, but I will inform Kurabi about his status so they could begin training to harness the Kyuubi, said as he moved to sit at his desk. I was going to ask you to do that anyways, Raki said as he made to leave. Raki, I called out. Raki stopped mid-step. This boy, Naruto, how good is he? Raki turned around to face his teacher, and shot him a small grin. To be honest, in a couple of years, he may be taking that hat from you, sensei. He always has had a fixation for becoming a Kage. And with that, Raki disappeared in a puff of smoke. I chuckled. Well, Naruto, welcome to Kumo, he thought as he got back to the losing battle, paperwork. God damn it, where is it? Yelled Naruto as he trudged through the busy streets of Kumo. He had been searching for a ramen stand for close to 2 hours and had so far come up with nothing. All he had found was the academy, which he filed under, remember later, and the red light district, where his mask had fallen off, giving the woman there a good look at his face. That was a long hour of running and hiding, thought Naruto as he continued to look for the ramen stand. I still think that you should have gotten caught, said Kyuubi. If you are gay Kit, I don't care if it does kill me, I will rip you to shreds. Naruto was brought out of his conversation with his inner demon, when he heard a couple of grunts coming from behind him. When he turned, he saw a young woman, most likely 13 or 14, carrying a bit too many bags of groceries. She had light gray hair that fell down her back, and a pair of B-cups that were barely visible underneath her apron. Now Naruto, being the gentleman he was, could not let her carry all of those back to wherever she was going on her own. Do you need some help, miss? He asked. The woman looked up to see Naruto standing next to her. She had emerald green eyes, which almost distracted Naruto enough to not hear her answer. If it would not be too much trouble, she asked a bit sheepishly. Naruto gave her an eye smile. It would be no problem at all. She blushed at the eye smile, and let him remove 2 of the bags from her arms. Naruto followed her for a minute in silence before he asked, "I'm sorry, but I never got your name." She turned her head around and smiled at him. "Sorry, my name is Aya, and your name is?" "Uzumaki Naruto," he said as he continued to follow the teen through the alleyways. "So Naruto-kun, you new to town?" she asked, trying to find out a bit more on the boy. Naruto gave a nervous laugh. "Is it that easy to tell?" Aya giggled. "Yep, especially when you don't know who I am. Almost everyone in Kumo know about my father's stand and me." Naruto raised his eyebrow to ask what type of stand it was, but was cut off when Aya said that they were there. They walked into a door with a sign over it that said, "Maho no Aji," that led into a carved-out cave. There were many rugs on the ground and booths around the rim. There was a multitude of people having a good time. He followed Aya behind the counter and helped her put the ingredients away. "So what is it you make here?" he asked, curious about what would attract this many people. "Well, we have a lot of foods," said Aya as she turned her back to Naruto to put away some of the vegetables. "We have dangos, soups, salads, udon, but our biggest seller is our ramen." She stopped putting away the food when she heard something drop. Aya looked at Naruto to find that he was frozen with wide eyes. She was about to ask what was wrong when he disappeared and reappeared right next to her, and began to give Aya the strongest hug of her life. "I knew it was fate." Naruto screamed in joy after he was done hugging Aya, who was blushing like a tomato, after feeling what Naruto really had under his shirt. So ripped, she thought, but was soon brought back to reality to see Naruto had moved to the front of the counter and was sitting on one of the chairs. "Well, seeing that you say the ramen is the most popular, I think I will need about 7 bowls to try," he said as he grinned underneath his mask. Aya had recovered from her daydream and was giggling at Naruto's antics. "All right, I'll get you a bowl, and it will be on the house for helping me with the groceries." A few minutes later, she came out of the kitchen with a bowl of steaming hot ramen. When she placed the bowl in front of Naruto, he was about to dig in, but saw that Aya had pulled out a small camera from under the table. "What is that for?" he asked as he watched her set it up. Aya gave him a smirk. "Little tradition I have here, and I take pictures of the faces of people who try our ramen for the first time. So take off that mask and enjoy." Naruto was about to decline the request, but his stomach was growling for ramen, so without hesitation, he pulled down his mask and took a heavenly sniff of the meal before him. Aya could hardly believe what she was seeing. Most people wore a mask to cover up something that they are ashamed of, but his face only brought one word to her mind: hot. The whiskers alone made her want to tie up the boy and leave him in her room. Aya almost forgot what she was doing until she remembered what she was here to do. When Naruto took the first bite, he knew he was in heaven. The ramen was one of the best he had ever tasted, being a very close second to the Ichirakus in Konoha. "Marry her, Kit," yelled Kyuubi. "If you do, all of this delicious food will be ours for free." Naruto's lips spread into a large foxy grin, while his eyes rolled to the ceiling. He was only brought back when he heard the click of the camera and a few giggles. Aya was trying to keep herself from bursting with laughter. The face Naruto had made was going to be a masterpiece in her collection. "That was by far the funniest reaction I have seen so far," Aya got out between giggles. Naruto pouted, causing him to look even more adorable, but quickly forgot about what she had said and went back to the delicious meal. After finishing 10 bowls in under an hour, which according to Aya was a record, he finally slowed down enough to speak. "That," said Naruto as he patted his stomach, "was one of the most delicious things I have ever eaten." "You are an excellent cook, Aya-chan." Aya blushed at the additional suffix. "Thank you, Naruto-kun, but what are you doing in Kumo?" Naruto gave her a foxy grin, which seemed to make a little blood flow to her cheeks. "I came here to join the Ninja Academy." "Really?" said Aya, getting a bit more interested. "I know some people who go there. I could introduce you if you'd like, and if you need any information about anyone you meet, just ask me." Giving her a smile, Naruto pulled up his mask to its original position, much to Aya's disappointment. That would be great, Aya-chan. I better get going, but where is the bathroom? Aya pointed down the hall. 2 doors on your left, she said. Naruto gave her a sheepish look, while scratching the back of his head. This gave Aya the chance to take another picture. Ops. Sorry, fingers slipped. She pretended to act embarrassed. Naruto just waved it off and walked to find the bathroom. When he was gone, Aya took out the photograph and looked at it. Yep. This is defiantly going in my private collection, she said with a giggle. Just then the door to the restaurant opened, making Aya scramble to hide the photo. In the entrance, were Omoi and Samui. Ohio Omoi-san, Samui-chan, what can I get you? Aya asked, as the two got closer to the counter. Omoi had dark skin with short white spiky hair and had a sucker sticking out of his mouth. He wore a gray overlong shirt with red bandage and shin guards, along with black shinobi-style pants. Samui had fair skin, blonde hair that reached down to her shoulders. Her chest easily matched Aya's, being close to B cups, and wore a standard Kumo Kunoichi uniform, except with a mesh undershirt and a low-cut skirt. I am fine, Aya-san. We just came to relax a bit while Yugito is off doing one of her revenge pranks, said Samui, who had moved her hands to her shoulders and began to rub them. Damn these back pains, she muttered. Omoi was still staring at the menu. Maybe I'll have some dangos. But what if I get stomach pains and have to go to the hospital, where a pretty nurse will saw that I only have a few days to live? But if he was cut off by Aya hitting him with a spoon. Just pick one, Omoi. I feel that Karui should be doing this. Where is she anyways? Omoi rubbed the new bump on his head, helping out Yugito. Aya made an O with her mouth before it morphed into a smirk. Oh, so you two are on a date, I see. Ah, young love, I am so glad I don't have to deal with the dating scene. Nope, all I need is my soulmate and I have found him. Both Omoi and Samui rolled their eyes at her tease. So who is the one? This week, it would be easier to believe if you didn't have a new one every week, said Samui as she stopped rubbing her shoulders. Aya sighed, and looked off dreamily into space. Oh, he is so kind. He helped me carry my groceries back to the store today. Then he complimented me on my cooking. Oh, and his body. It is the body of a god. I got a good feel of it and I can tell you he is ripped. Then his face is the most adorable thing I have ever seen. He has these 3 little birthmarks on each cheek that look like whiskers. Makes you want to glomp him right there. Omoi looked at Samui for a translation, who sighed. Basically, the man was nice to her, likes the food here, and is hot, she said in a stoic voice. Omoi nodded, then looked back to Aya. So where is your soulmate? He asked, looking around the restaurant. Aya was startled out of her daydream and began to look around. He should be right. Aha, there he is. Finally pointing at a masked blonde who had just exited the bathroom. The blonde boy walked up to Aya. Thanks for the meal, Aya-chan. I am definitely coming back here, he said in a jovial tone. My pleasure, Naruto-kun. But before you go, I want you to meet some of my friends. Aya motioned to Samui and Omoi. This is Samui and Omoi. They will also be attending the Ninja Academy. Guys, this is Uzumaki Naruto. Naruto gave a wave to the pair, who both was still analyzing him. As Samui looked him over, she could tell that Aya had been right about him being cute, though she could not see his face. He had medium-length blonde hair like her, but his was a bit more yellow, and still retained some of the spikiness. His eyes were a much brighter blue than hers, sparkling with hints of kindness and caring. Omoi was the first to respond. Nice to meet you, Uzumaki-san. At first I thought you were going to be mean, and I would have to defeat you in front of everybody, causing your hate to slowly build up inside of you until it exploded. A large sweat drop rolled down Naruto's forehead. Wow, he really overthinks things, said the Kyuubi, as Naruto could only mentally nod his head. Naruto then looked around the restaurant and then turned back to Omoi. Well, none of that has happened so far, so I think we are good. Also call me Naruto, I have never been big on formalities. Omoi gave a smile, deciding that he liked this guy, and held out his fist, which Naruto tapped with his own. Samui then gave a wave back to Naruto, so you are going to be in our graduating class. We should at least get you up to speed on what we have been doing, she said. Naruto scratched the back of his head sheepishly, and headed to a booth in the back with Samui and Omoi. Aya still had to work, so she gave a wave and went back to serving customers. When they arrived, Omoi asked, "Nay Naruto, what is with that face mask?" Naruto gave him a grin underneath his mask. "Personal protection," he said, trying to end it right there. "I don't really like people keeping secrets from me," said Samui, who had narrowed her eyes a bit. "I think that we at least deserve to see your face as payment for telling you about the academy." Naruto wanted to deny the deal, but he really needed to know about the school. Information is the key, he thought, and after a sigh, he removed his mask. Samui couldn't help but let a bit of blood run to her cheeks. Naruto was exactly what Aya had said, hot. The whisker marks made him look a bit wild, and Samui had to stop herself from petting them. "Samui-san, are you blushing?" asked Omoi as if it were the craziest thing in the world. No, she quickly stuttered out, regaining her composure. Omoi then looked at Naruto. "I see why you call it personal protection. To make Samui blush, those whiskers must be a real turn-on. I could only imagine what would happen if a fangirl saw you." Naruto paled at the thought and just silently nodded, hoping that no fangirl did ever see him without his mask. "So what do you have to tell me?" he asked, quickly trying to get the new thoughts of being chased by mobs of fangirls out of his mind. "There is only a few things you really need to know," said Samui, who had regained her stoic tone. "Osamu-sensei is a bit of a stickler to the basics, but if you just get what he is talking about, you will do fine. The class is basically divided into two sides, one for the Neko and Ukami, the other for the Kitsune." Naruto raised his eyebrow. "Those are the summons that each of the Kumo no Sansoku use. Chiasa Ayumi is the Neko Sennin, Takashi Manabu is the Ukamis, and Raki Samayu is the Kitsune Sennin." Omoi nodded. "That's right, the Neko and Ukami side supports Takashi and Chiasa while the other supports Raki." "Why would they need that?" Naruto asked, still confused. "The three Sennin are supposed to be a team, right?" Samui frowned a bit. "Yes, and they still are. But the question the two sides are arguing is who is the leader of the team, Raki or Takashi. From what the Jonins have said, those two have been at odds. While many see Takashi as the smarter one, Raki is considered to be the strongest shinobi, and is supposed to have hundreds of contacts in lots of countries." Naruto nodded in understanding. "Which side are you on?" he asked, unsure on whether he should root for his sensei, or the other guy. "Me, Yugito, Aya, Omoi, Karui, and a few others support Raki, but that is mostly because Kurabi, the Jinchuriki of the Hachibi, thinks so," said Samui as she began to massage her shoulders again. "Alright, anything else?" Naruto asked, still a bit curious about the debate on whom was the leader of the Kumo no Sansoku. "Just some minor things," said Omoi, as he unwrapped another sucker to stick in his mouth. "Yugito, apprentice of Kurabi, is also a Jinchuriki, so don't mess with her, we won't mess with you." He sent a glare at Naruto, who just nodded. He knew what it was like to be despised for no good reason. "Also don't get between her and Yuriko Sango. She is the apprentice of Chiasa, and while her master may be kind, she is definitely spoiled rotten and the #1 fangirl for Naoki Minoru, head of the Ukami and Neko side and also the apprentice of Takashi. He is kind of an arrogant brat, so just try to ignore him." "What about the apprentice of Raki?" Naruto asked, feigning ignorance. "There isn't one," Samui put it curtly as she finished her self-massage. "When they tried to push one on him a couple of years ago, he ran for it, but I guess a lot of people would if they had the choices he did." Naruto sighed again and looked at the clock. "Well, I better be getting to the inn. Thanks for the help, see you tomorrow, I guess." He stood up and reattached his mask. Omoi gave him a fist bump, and Samui was about to stand up as well, when her foot caught onto the leg of the table and began to fall. On instinct, Naruto went to catch her, grabbing her just before she hit the ground. They stayed like that for a few moments before they both realized the position that they were in, and quickly separated. Thanks, Samui said quietly, a light blush apparent on her face. And no problem, Naruto responded, thanking Kami that his mask was on, otherwise she would have seen his blush. Well, I better go, later Omoi, see ya Samui-chan. And with that Naruto left the restaurant. As soon as he was gone, Aya came up with a smirk on her face. What was that, Samui? You trying to feel up my future boyfriend him? Samui quickly regained her composure and gave a blank stare to Aya. You have to start dating him before he can be your boyfriend. Aya's grin grew a bit larger, and the fall. Samui stiffened a bit. I was just confirming if everything you said about him was true. Aya's grin looked like it was going to split her face. She said in a sing-song voice. Samui looked at her feet, trying to hide the small blush forming on her face. You were right, she said, leaving a shocked Omoi, and Aya rolling on the floor laughing. Naruto walked down the street to the inn he was staying at. Due to his morning of searching for ramen, he had ended up going around most of the city and knew a general map of the area. It was night when he had finally left the restaurant. He was still wondering about the argument going on, and about the other two Jinchuriki. Hey Kyuubi, how is the Hachibi? He thought to his mindscape. Well, when I knew him, he was wild and crazy on the outside, while in private he could act calm and relaxed, easily carrying on a conversation, said Kyuubi is prepared to sleep. And what about the other one? Any idea about who the other Jinchuriki holds? Naruto asked again. Your guess is as good as mine, Kit, but if I had to, the only Biju that I know of that disappeared close to here was the Nibi, and trust me, Kit, she is a true demon. Imagine all of the comments I make about women, then multiply it by 1,000. That is what it is like to be her container, Kyuubi said. His tone then began a bit more frightful, and if you are unlucky enough to be chosen to be her mate, then there is few things that can stop her. Believe me, I know. Kyuubi shivered at the memory. Naruto waited for anything else, but when he heard nothing, he sighed. Well, I guess we will just have to see it ourselves. You to look up? He asked. This was the main reason he had come here. Amy reached into her purse, and pulled out a small vial of blood. It was a bitch to get, but it proves it. Uzumaki Naruto is the son of Uzumaki Kushina and Namikaze Minato. She tossed the vial to Raki, who hid it in his cloak. Well, now he has good blood and an adorable face. Oh, if he were just a couple of years older, Amy pretended to swoon. Raki just rolled his eyes. Yeah, well, thanks for the help. Just keep me posted and we will talk soon, he said as he began to walk out the door. Say hi to Naru-kun for me, and tell him that my door is always open, Amy said with a wink.